straight, and he is not letting Winnipeg's winter stop him. We'll find out more. He's part of our Show Us Your Winter series, so that's coming up a little bit later as well. To more serious matters, we've been doing an ongoing series of conversations about healthcare on the program. Today, personal care homes don't always have the reputation of being home-like. A former Winnipegger is pushing to change that. We're going to learn all about the small care home model and how that could change how we age. So that fits into trying to find more spaces and places for people in the province. And this all goes back to a lot of long-term care patients ending up in emergency care, in fact. Stay tuned. World Report's next.
Today on Q with Tom Power. The Grammy-winning singer-songwriter Alessia Cara has made an unlikely career making songs about being an introvert in an industry that rewards extroverts. On the occasion of her new album, Alessia will be in the studio talking a little bit about her early days and what she's learned to make this album. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Sam Sampson. World leaders, high-ranking officials, and security experts are in Munich today. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly is there, as is U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. And as Abby Kugadassan reports, the war in Ukraine is at the forefront of the Global Security Conference.
3 days in Munich will allow European officials to meet and mingle with the U.S. delegation for the first time since Donald Trump returned to the White House.
Europeans will use this opportunity to try to get a sense of the U.S. administration.
Raphael Loss is with the European Council on Foreign Relations in Berlin. He says world leaders and high-ranking officials take to the main stage of the security conference in southern Germany.
But much more will happen in the back rooms, on the hallways.
Much of the talk will focus on a pressing issue for Europeans: what happens next in Ukraine? In recent days, Trump has confirmed speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin, announcing the two had agreed to start negotiations immediately. Trump has also suggested Ukraine won't get all of its territory back from the Kremlin. And his Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth, set off even more alarm bells by saying NATO membership for Kyiv is off the table.
That they've basically conceded on many of the core demands that Vladimir Putin laid out when he started.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeated the need for a lasting and reliable peace, one where security guarantees backed by the U.S. ensure his country is not attacked again. And EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas reiterated concerns emerging from various capitals across the continent.
It is clear that any deal behind our backs will not work. It's clear that appeasement also always fails.
There's confusion too about whether U.S. troops would join peacekeeping soldiers from the EU if and when a ceasefire is negotiated. Europe wants to know exactly how much Trump is willing to do on the world stage to uphold the existing rules-based order as he pushes for a more isolationist America. Abby Kugadassan, CBC News, Berlin.
A Russian drone attack hit the protective confinement shell of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant overnight. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says radiation levels have not increased. The high explosive warhead damaged the structure and started a fire, which has since been extinguished. The International Atomic Energy Agency says there was no indication of a breach in the inner containment shell. U.S. President Donald Trump continues to follow through with his threat to apply tariffs to steel and aluminum, not just for Canada, but all countries. And he's warning of reciprocal tariffs on America's global trading partners over a wide range of practices he sees as unfair. That includes Canada's DST, or Digital Services Tax. Cameron McIntosh joins me from our Washington bureau. So Cam, what is the DST?
That's the digital services tax. Canadians don't pay it, at least not up front. It's a 3% tax Canada puts on large digital firms like Amazon, Meta, all for doing business in Canada. Now, it came in last June amid concerns foreign digital companies were operating in Canada for free. It's always been controversial as Canada and other countries grapple with taxing online services. The Parliamentary Budget Office estimates the tax will bring in more than $7 billion over 5 years. Of course, tech companies oppose it. So do many others, including the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, which says in the long run, it only increases costs for consumers.
So why is Trump so fixated on this?
To be fair, the U.S. has always opposed it, saying it unfairly targets American firms. President Biden even started a challenge under the Canada-US-Mexico Free Trade Agreement. But it is exactly the type of tax President Trump singles out as unfair to America, insisting reciprocal global tariffs will level the playing field.
I say America first. I say make America great again. That's what we're doing. I think it's the most important thing I've signed. I've signed some very important things.
Now, a White House fact sheet went even further, saying only America should be allowed to tax American firms. For those trying to keep score at home, this is in addition to the other tariffs Trump is threatening against Canada. Again, the president was very clear. For Canada, this could all be avoided, just become the 51st state. Sam?
Cameron McIntosh from Washington. Thanks, Cam.
My pleasure.
The 2-month holiday on federal and provincial sales tax ends tomorrow. But while some businesses say they didn't love the tax break, others want it extended and expanded in the face of those potential tariffs from Washington. More now from Philip Lee Shannock.
So I had to go in, manually just turn off all the taxes.
Toronto gift shop owner Trin Nago put in extra hours prepping for the tax break just before Christmas.
And during that time, you're already working like 12 hours a day, so you're exhausted.
Nago says it didn't help her sales due to the short time frame and limited number of products exempt from the tax. So is she looking forward to reversing her work this weekend?
No, but at least it's a quiet time, so that's fine.
Statistics Canada data on the impact of the tax holiday won't be out for a while, but Dan Kelly of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says it wasn't worth the bother.
So it didn't move the dial very much with respect to sales, but did add a lot in terms of administrative complexity.
Kelly says only 5% of his 100,000 members reported increased sales. But Kelly Higginson of Restaurants Canada disagrees.
So really the GST holiday is doing what it was supposed to do.
She credits the tax holiday for pushing hiring to pre-pandemic highs. And she says with the threat of U.S. tariffs, it should be permanent.
Taxing food, especially at a time like this, really is just wrong.
But economists say such tax holidays tend to push deficits higher at a time when governments may need to spend more to blunt the impacts of a potential trade war on the economy. Philip Shannock, CBC News, Toronto.
To Ottawa now, where Conservative MPs are meeting for a strategy session on Parliament Hill. And tomorrow, they're planning to hold a major rally to mark Flag Day. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, Canada's political landscape has changed pretty quickly in the last few weeks. How are the Conservatives responding?
Sam, as the Conservative caucus gathers this Valentine's Day, it's true patriot love they're preparing to wear on their sleeves, with Pierre Poilievre headlining what's hoped to be a major partisan rally tomorrow here in Ottawa, hooked off a holiday that was actually a creation of the Chrétien government in the aftermath of Canada's near-death experience in the 1995 Quebec referendum. National Flag Day will be marked by the Governor-General with a ceremony on Parliament Hill this morning. But earlier this week on his social media, Poilievre stood with the flag at his official residence and called on all Canadians to unite like never before against the threat of tariffs and other insults hurled their way by U.S. President Donald Trump. The text messages his party's been blasting out to try to build a big crowd for his rally, though, suggests it will be a partisan affair and one that leans into a very different message than the Canada is broken theme that Conservatives had been hammering when their target was Justin Trudeau. Instead, we are now seeing Poilievre use a Wilfrid Laurier quote, actually, Canada first, Canada last, Canada always, as his tagline. Words that simultaneously push back against Trump while also embracing the populist rhetorical style of the America First movement that continues to resonate with some Conservatives here in Canada.
So why is this important heading into the next election?
Well, the latest threats from Washington have put patriotism on the ballot. It was the reason, for example, that Doug Ford cited for pulling the plug early in Ontario and hitting the campaign trail. Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney are both focusing their Liberal leadership campaigns around their qualifications to take on Trump. And recent public opinion surveys suggest the next federal election race is tightening too, as voters shift their focus to the more existential question of Canada's sovereignty.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
The Vatican says Pope Francis has been admitted to hospital to be treated for bronchitis. Megan Williams is in Rome with the details.
At about 10:30 local time this morning, the Vatican issued a statement saying the Pope is being admitted to Gemelli Hospital here in Rome for what it called some necessary diagnostic tests and treatment for bronchitis. Earlier this month, Francis told pilgrims at a weekly audience that he was suffering from a, quote, strong cold. He's continued to hold daily audiences in his Vatican Santa Marta residence. He even presided over an outdoor mass on Sunday, though his breathing was too labored for him to read aloud. The 88-year-old Catholic leader has suffered from respiratory problems several times over the past couple of years. His health issues, though, haven't stopped him from following world politics. Earlier this week, he issued a sharp criticism of U.S. President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown, telling American bishops that criminalizing migrants will end badly. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
And that's the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Sam Sampson. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thank you for joining us here on Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. This is your morning show on CBC, live downtown in Winnipeg. Good to have you here. We're going to be cold again today in the city and across the province. Well, this hour on the program, what a story it was. Tracking $20 million of gold stolen from Canada's busiest airport. The Fifth Estate's Timothy Sawa is going to walk us through the details of what happened in that case, which you likely remember. So that's coming up straight ahead. Also this hour on the program, are single women happier than single men? On this Valentine's Day, we're going to find out that there is actually some evidence to say that that is true. So we have an interview about it, and that's coming up at 10 to 7. And then we're also going to talk to a local professor of political science about studies about what he thinks about the premiers of Canada visiting Washington, D.C. Was it worth the trip? We'll get some of that analysis, including with headlines. So headlines are up next. Lauren Donnelly is in for Heather Wells this morning, and let's go to her live in our news center. Good morning.
Good morning. The legal team of a man found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his neighbor says they will appeal the verdict. A jury found Eric Wildman guilty yesterday in the June 2021 death of 40-year-old Clifford Joseph. His lawyer says they will start the appeal process once his client is officially sentenced. And it's bitterly cold out there, but take comfort in the fact that we're not the only ones going through it. Northern Saskatchewan and northern Manitoba saw wind chill hit minus 50 last night. The southern parts of the provinces, along with northern Alberta, saw wind chill in the minus 40s. Environment Canada says those values may moderate slightly during the day, but it's not over yet. The extreme cold is expected to return this evening. Your next local news is at 6:30.
All right, thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Marcy.
And for a little more on weather, here's Abby Adiemi.
Yep, right now in Winnipeg, we're at minus 23. Partly cloudy conditions. We're seeing a mix of sun and clouds in the forecast today. The winds will be picking up by the midday period, becoming breezy. We'll see highs around minus 17 for Winnipeg, but with the wind chill factored in, it's going to be feeling like minus 32. So you still want to brace for that. It's still cold outside.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Ending the week exactly how we started it with this cold. Corey, quick look at the commute.
Quiet commute so far. I haven't heard of any major issues out there, but if you're walking, bike, and driving, you see something going on, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's start with a story from Canada that made headlines all around the world. A brazen robbery at Air Canada cargo facility in 2023. You might recall this. Thieves made off with more than $20 million in gold. The largest gold theft, in fact, in Canadian history. Police ended up charging 9 men. And tonight, the Fifth Estate goes on a journey to find out what happened. It takes them all around the world, from Pennsylvania to Dubai. They've come back with exclusive new details, including what may have happened to some of the gold and the whereabouts of one of the suspects who's on the run. Fifth Estate producer Timothy Sawa joins us now live. Good morning, Timothy.
Good morning.
So police describe this as something worthy of Netflix, but I know you guys kind of beat them to the punch because, and likely to be much more entertaining, I suspect. But take us back to April 2023 and remind us what happened at Pearson Airport.
Yeah, for sure. April 17th, 2023, a shipment of gold bars is arriving, 6,600 gold bars, 400 kilos. And it's actually supposed to go to a Canadian bank, we've learned. But police claim and allege a group of men were planned, ready, and waiting for this gold. And they had a fake airway bill, which is apparently all they needed. They drove away with the gold. That was around 7:30 p.m. in the evening. 2 hours later, a Brinks truck arrives, the one that's supposed to pick up the gold, and says, "We're here." And that's when they realized it was gone, and police were called. And as we now know, 9 men have been accused.
You've obtained some exclusive new information, as I mentioned, on the case. Can you tell us what you found?
Yeah, we've obtained a document that gives a sort of a snapshot into what police and authorities believe happened in this case. It's incredibly detailed, and now it hasn't been tested in court, what's in this document, but it does give us a sense of what the authorities believe happened. It's got text messages, exchanges, it's got surveillance information. It's sort of a blow-by-blow of what they believe happened.
What is alleged about some of the suspects that you can share?
Yeah, let's start with Simran Preet Panesar. Police claim he was the acting manager at the Air Canada cargo facility that day, and he is what's described as sort of the inside man. He was he gave police a tour of the facility early on before they knew he was a suspect, which is kind of funny. So they claim that he manipulated the Air Canada cargo system. He was working there that day, had the computer system manipulated, and made sure that the gold went where it was supposed to go. And we can see some text messages in this document where police claim he's texting with a colleague, and the colleague says, "I heard there was a theft last night at the facility." He replies, "No, nothing like that happened."
You mentioned that he went to India. So what happened next?
Yeah, he did. So we spoke to the lead detective in this case, Detective Sergeant Mike Mavity, and he tells us that 3 months after the heist, they were looking at Panesar now as a key suspect. And at that point, Panesar resigns and moves to India. And it's still early in the investigation for the police. So Mavity told us they had a difficult decision to make at this point.
What do we do with him now? Do we arrest him, try and get his phone and do all that stuff, or do we let him leave? There's downsides and upsides to both. Obviously, we arrest him at the time, we get some of that evidence and have him in custody in that. The downside is all the other people that we haven't identified now know we're onto them, and they can start covering their tracks or fleeing or do whatever.
So that's the lead detective in the case. And you can imagine police have this decision to make. They have what they think is a key suspect. He's about to get on a plane to India, and they have to let him go because they don't know who else was involved, and they want to know who else was involved. And now they do, so they think it was a good decision.
So because they had to do that, where is Panesar now?
He's in India. We found him in northern India. We had a local journalist go. We tracked down his address. He went to his house and spoke to him, says he's innocent. And we got a photograph of him, which you'll see in our story tonight.
Well, what about, Timothy, some of the other suspects? What new information have you learned about them?
There's another man named Arslan Chowdhury. And he's described in this document as the suspect being described as the quote-unquote top dog, the kind of the lead organizer in this operation. And police say on the day of the operation, he texted other suspects more than 800 times as this heist is playing out. And I'll give you a little snapshot of some text messages police say happened the next day. 5:09 a.m. in the morning, another suspect texts Chowdhury and says, "I'm so happy for you, bro. I can't even sleep, LOL." Chowdhury replies, "It's insane." So gives you a snapshot of what police say was being said between the suspects when they had succeeded.
Before you go this morning, I mean, this still leaves us with the biggest question in the story, which is what happened to all of the gold?
Yeah, the $20 million question. So police did actually manage to track down $89,000 worth of the gold, not much. They say they believe most of it went overseas, but a portion of it, and they don't know how much, but a portion of it they say was sold in Canada. And there's a text message exchange that they say shows how and where and who sold the gold and who bought the gold. So you'll be able to see that in our show tonight.
Timothy, thank you very much for coming on the program so early this morning and walking us through some of the details that you can share. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
That is Timothy Salwa, producer with CBC's The Fifth Estate. So Inside Job Airport Gold Heist airs tonight on the 5th at 9 o'clock on CBC and CBC Gem. You can also watch it on YouTube if you can't wait. And it will start streaming this afternoon at noon local time.
The United States has been ripped off.
The stories that matter. Canada will be responding as they happen. We must put Canada first. At home and around the world.
We don't need the products that they have.
And what they mean to you. For news you can trust.
We're coming to you live.
Stay with CBC News.
Stream anytime. CBC News.
6:19 the time now. I'm Marcy Marcusa with Information Radio. You're on CBC on this Valentine's Day. It is going to be cold, a high of -17, mix of sun and cloud with wind chill -32 this morning in Winnipeg. And right now around the province, it's brisk. It's -23 right now in the city. The cold spot, in case you're curious, is Thompson at -39 and Morden sitting down south here at -23, which is the warm spot, quote unquote, right? Next on the show, happy birthday to the Maple Leaf. It turns 60 years old tomorrow. On February 15th, 1965, it was first raised as our national emblem. Not that long ago when you really think about this, right? And despite its renewed popularity, the current Canadian flag was not without controversy. Here's a CBC report that we dug out of the archives. This is about the flag's 25th anniversary back in 1990.
It is now proudly considered a symbol of Canada. But 25 years ago, the maple leaf was the cause of bitterness and division. In 1965, demonstrators squared off on Parliament Hill when the Liberal government prepared to replace the red ensign, some of them with flag ideas of their own. The man most often credited for the design is the former Lieutenant Governor of New Brunswick, George Stanley.
I already had the basic flag in my mind, and that was the red and the white and the red.
What was your job? But John Matheson, the former MP who sent the final design to an artist, says the idea came from many people.
There's no author, there is no designer, there's no creator of Canada's flag.
In an emotional and often nasty debate, John Diefenbaker's opposition Conservatives fought the flag. Senator Heath Macquarie was a Tory MP at the time.
The people who were intense about the matter would say that they're not so interested in what's on the flag, but what's going to be taken off. And it was not putting on a red maple leaf, but taking off the Union Jack.
English Canadians accused French Canadians of trying to scuttle the ensign because of its symbolic ties to Britain. But Lester Pearson's Liberals won out, and on the day the flag was raised, Diefenbaker could be seen wiping away a tear. Ironically, today's celebration was led by a Conservative Prime Minister and a Governor-General who once sat as a Conservative MP. And even as Brian Mulroney urged Canadians to forget the quarrels of the past, he acknowledged the rifts that still exist.
Let us resolve here and now, for the sake of all Canadians, that this flag, the highest emblem of our nationhood, will never, ever fly over a divided country.
School children braved the blustery cold to watch this ceremony. The flag was raised by the same man who, as an RCMP officer 25 years ago, raised the first flag. Anna Maria Tremonti, CBC News, Ottawa.
Anna Maria Tremonti? I would have never guessed that. She sounds like she's about 10 years old. Isn't that weird? What happens to our voices? We were talking about that yesterday, actually, in the newsroom. That is an archival piece, of course, from 1990, a report from the Canadian flag's 25th anniversary. Tomorrow is Flag Day here in Canada. Now, earlier this week, all of the country's living former prime ministers sent out a group request for Canadians to fly the maple leaf this weekend in a display of national pride. And a lot of people have a complicated relationship with the flag. You've been writing to us a little bit about that on Facebook. I asked yesterday what you're going to be doing on Flag Day and why. But the vast majority of you have been writing in saying that you are going to are going to be buying a flag and maybe already have and been putting it up. Showing love for Canada tomorrow is part of, I think, what we're going to see across the country. Now, speaking of Governor Generals, there was one featured in that piece. Former Governor General and Commander-in-Chief of Canada, Michaëlle Jean, is going to be on the show after 7 o'clock. We'll hear an interview that we had with her early this morning about the surge in Canadian pride in response to Donald Trump's threats. But most importantly, in that interview, I think we have a pretty good discussion around sovereignty. You may be sitting with your own family and friends and talking about this threat of, Canada, Donald Trump repeating Canada becoming the 51st state. I think there's a lot of people sitting saying, some people will be like in the let's not take it too seriously camp, and others are saying, wait a minute. Michaëlle Jean says we have to take it very seriously, and we're going to hear why. That's coming up after 7 o'clock. Right now, a little bit of music from Alessia Cara, the Ontario-born pop star who drops her 4th studio album called Love and Hyperbole today. She's also announced, by the way, a world tour. She just announced that yesterday. Winnipeg's one of the stops. She will play the Burton Cummings Theatre, Alessia Cara, May 19th, and she's going to be today talking about all of this on Q with host Tom Power later this morning. But from the new album, this is Alessia Cara and Obvious.
On your mind, you see the cracks in the eyes. Without my hand to hold, I'm the first to know. You're gripping on the waist of other times. Try to make it suffice, to make it tangible. It's impossible. Fears are only constellations, only glowing if we make them. We're just fine. If it's any consolation, you're my favorite. It's you and I. You gotta know that, right? Isn't it obvious? You know that we got enough. Isn't it obvious that I'm sure? Isn't it obvious? You know that we got enough. Isn't it obvious? I'm all yours, all yours. My picture in your wallet on display, but it's never the same as being close to you. I wanna be close to you, be close to you. It's hard to feel you when you're far away, but you make it okay. 'Cause if I'm loving you, I can never lose. Fears are only false creations, just as vibrant as we paint them. We're just fine. So if it's any consolation, you're my favorite. It's you and I. You gotta know that, right? Isn't it obvious? You know that we got enough. Isn't it obvious that I'm sure? Isn't it obvious? You know that we got enough. Isn't it obvious? I'm all yours, all yours.
Alessia Cara and Obvious. She will be on Q today with Tom Power if you want to check it out. It's coming up later this morning right here on CBC Radio.
CBC Music Live. Head into the big venues, intimate concert halls, and small stages. Celebrate live music the way it was meant to be. Share in an unmistakable energy of being shoulder to shoulder with music fans and face to face with some of Canada's best musicians.
It's such an honor and a pleasure to play here.
CBC Music Live, brand new season. And catch past episodes right now on CBC Gem.
All right, so it's Valentine's Day, and we always try to find a creative question. So why don't we take calls on this? What's your most unexpected love story? And it could be falling in love with a job or a person or a friend or I don't know, maybe it's still having love between you and an ex-partner. Maybe you're co-parenting. But what's your most unexpected love story or story of love? You can call on that, 788-3205, 204-788-3205. On Facebook, I've posted, besides the people and pets in your life, what do you love and why? And a lot of you are writing in already early this morning. Alicia Modetska-Bolowitz says, I love life because it's precious. Time flies by far too quickly. You must embrace each and every day with gusto. Rob Jessup saying, coffee. Yeah, you're not the only one. Ted Franzen also just putting a picture of himself, an avatar holding up a big cup of coffee with a heart on it. Everyone loves coffee. Lavon Marsh saying, my family, friends, house, my car, my yard, my morning dog walks with my husband, God, and my dad's cabin. So besides the people and pets in your life, what do you love and why? You can write to us on Facebook on this Valentine's Day. It's cold out there. Hug your loved ones to stay warm. A high of minus 17 with the wind chill. It's going to feel like minus 32 this morning. We have business news coming up as always. If you're a regular listener, you know Crystal Ramlakan is going to join us. Today, she's talking about the reciprocal tariffs this time and what those mean around the world and also what the impact could be on Canada. Also, she has a story about how some major media companies are suing a Canadian AI firm. So we'll get details on that after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Lauren Donnelly in Winnipeg at 6:30. It's minus 24 degrees with ice crystals at the Winnipeg airport. A mix of sun and cloud today, a high of minus 17. A Manitoba man found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his neighbor will appeal the verdict. That's according to his lawyer, Martin Glazer. A jury found Eric Wildman guilty yesterday in the June 2021 death of 40-year-old Clifford Joseph. Joseph's remains were found more than a month after he had been reported missing. He had a broken leg and jaw, though prosecutors say he was killed by gunshots. Glazer says he plans to start the appeal process once his client is officially sentenced.
This is an injustice, and my client maintains his innocence and maintains that he was wrongfully convicted.
During the trial, prosecutors alleged Wildman hit Joseph with his vehicle when he caught him trying to steal from his property in the village of Stead. Wildman then allegedly took Joseph to a different location where he killed him. Residents in a small community in northern Manitoba are missing medical appointments because they can't afford the cost of getting to them. The 200-kilometer trip to Thompson can cost upwards of $350. Rose Moose is fundraising to help her family and others in the community.
I'm fundraising for us to try and get a medical vehicle, for us to have money for anybody to go to have money for food or $150 to get back. But we haven't got that money yet.
The Northern Regional Health Authority said in a statement patients are reimbursed, but only after the travel is complete, and the health authority is not responsible for providing transportation services. Leaf Rapids is home to about 350 people with no public transport. A Manitoba chiropractor has been charged with 8 counts of voyeurism after hidden cameras were found in his office. Dr. Robert Stitt is no longer practicing and his license is suspended. In January 2024, a patient complained to the Manitoba Chiropractors Association alleging Stitt inappropriately touched her back. While investigating the complaint, the regulatory body learned that Stitt had been recording his interactions with patients and called Winnipeg police. Police searched Stitt's office and seized 5 fake sprinkler heads that concealed cameras, plus a recording device in a suspended ceiling. His next court date is set for April 1st. A Manitoba politics professor questions the value of Premier Wab Kinew's trip to Washington. Kinew and other premiers met with government officials in an effort to boost Canada-U.S. relations. Paul Thomas at the University of Manitoba says that approach may have worked well for Kinew's predecessor, Gary Dewar, but times have changed.
That kind of strategic and tactical approach has far diminished value
in dealing with a figure like Donald Trump. He just is not subject to rational arguments.
After the meetings, Kinew told reporters he thought the relationship between the two countries was in a better place. While the premiers were in Washington, U.S. President repeated his desire to make Canada the 51st state. Considering the threats coming from the Trump White House, former Prime Minister Joe Clark, like many Canadians, is concerned about the country's sovereignty. He's urging Canadians to let their voices be heard south of the border.
Including simple little things like, excuse me for this simplicity, simply writing letters to our friends in the U.S., being in touch with them, not to condemn their president, but to make the case of the value which most of them know quite precisely that Canada holds.
That's Clark in conversation with Matt Galloway, the host of The Current on CBC Radio 1. You can hear the full interview later this morning. Clark and the other three surviving former prime ministers are calling on Canadians to show their patriotism tomorrow by flying the maple leaf for Flag Day. Finally, a Chilean man has spoken of how he thought he was dead after being swallowed whole by a whale before being spat out. Adrian Simancas was kayaking off Chile's southern coast with his father, who captured the entire incident on camera. His son and his kayak can be seen being suddenly engulfed by the humpback whale before reappearing seconds later. Adrian described his experience.
Yes, at first, when I thought I had died, it was like, of course, a lot of terror, because I thought, no, there's nothing I could do. When I got out and started to float, I was really afraid that something would happen to my dad too, that we wouldn't have reached the shore in time and I would get hypothermia.
Despite the scare, both men returned to shore uninjured. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg.
All right, thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Nice to have you with us this morning, by the way.
My pleasure. So much fun.
You might not know this, but we were talking about your kid on Halloween.
Oh, yes, my broccoli.
How old's your baby now?
He is 13 months, soon to be 14 months.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I loved that he was dressed up like broccoli for listeners that might have missed it. But I just thought it was the smartest because it was soft and it was a toque and it looked like it was knit and it had these pom-poms all over that different colors of green. It really looked like he was a broccoli head. It was awesome.
You have to think about the layers here in Manitoba for Halloween.
Cutie patootie. All right. Well, nice to have you back.
Thanks, Marcy.
Let's go to Abby Adiyemi, who's here with our regional forecast today.
Yep, the extreme cold continues throughout the province with warnings in place from south to the north. Bitterly cold wind chills affecting most of the regions, making it really, really hard to be outside without enough covering. For Winnipeg at this time, it is minus 23, partly cloudy conditions we are seeing. Later this morning, expect a mix of sun and clouds. We get to a high of minus 17. However, the wind chill this morning makes it feel like minus 32. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region from Morden, Winkler, all the way down to the U.S. border. We have the temperatures hovering around minus 23, 24 at this time. A mix of sun and clouds also in play for that region later in the day. Heading west now, Brandon is currently sitting at minus 27 and partly cloudy conditions we're seeing for the Westman region. We should see a high of minus 18 today. However, the wind chills makes it feel like minus 38. We do have a wind chill warning, extreme cold warning in effect for that part of the province. In the Parkland region, similar wind, extreme cold warning in effect there also. Temperatures around minus 32 at this time. Expect highs to be around minus 19. However, for folks in Dauphin, it actually feels like minus 43 outside this morning, so you want to take care. Dauphin, good morning to you in Gimli. How you doing? You're currently at minus 30. Expect a mix of sun and clouds today. You also have extreme cold warning in effect with that wind chill feeling like minus 42 this morning. The powerful influence hovering around at minus 38, close to minus 40 this morning. It's pretty cold out there. The wind chill is going to be between minus 45 and minus 50 for folks there, so you want to take extra care. Up north in Thompson, minus 35. We're seeing at this time wind chills making it feel like minus 45. Expect a high of minus 25. 35 this morning. For the north in Churchill, minus 37. We're seeing wind chills around minus 50. It is dangerously cold for folks in Churchill and surrounding areas, so you need to take care. We're going to see highs, mercy, around minus 30. I don't think minus 30 is warm.
I know.
I looked at it and I'm like, minus 30? Warm? No. But that wind chill is around minus 30, minus 50 this morning. So from Winnipeg to the north, we still have this really cold day continuing.
We got to name it something else is all. Like, there's nothing high about it.
I know that, like, it's not high. It's just going to be, the cold is just going to.
We should just call it the BWCD. BWCD. The best we can do today.
Yeah, the best we can do today.
The BWC. That took me a while. Corey's looking at me quizzically like, where are you going? What's happening?
Yep, extreme cold affecting the whole province today. But funny enough, Winnipeg, we don't have any cold warnings, but it's still cold outside.
Yeah. All right, let's get into what's happening in the actual commute, which is why Corey's here.
Quiet commute overall. Haven't heard of any major issues. Highways are looking actually really good down here in southern Manitoba. Up north, around Thompson, Gillam, Lynn Lake, might see some poor visibility. So just be careful there. Other than that, if you do see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me an update. Also, it's Friday, so if you're going to hit any ski trails or anything like that, or you're on the river this morning, tell me what it's looking like. Give us some updates. I'd love to hear some good stuff. Why not? 204-788-3093.
All right, so let's talk good stuff then. Let's keep you here, Corey, for a second, and then invite Abby back on the airwaves. And then maybe even Crystal Lee. I don't know if Crystal Lee's ready to roll with us. She's standing by to do business news.
I'm here.
Hey, so let's get into a question that I'm asking here. So it's Valentine's Day, right? Mm-hmm. Besides the people and the pets in your life, what do you love and why? You're first, Corey.
Ooh, I love to run.
Yeah, I was gonna guess that.
I feel like I'm probably saying the obvious one, but
that's
I just
okay
love I just love to
you love
move.
to run. So what do you love about it? Like, why? What does it give you?
I think it's the closest thing to meditation I feel. Like I've never been the kind of guy who can sit there and be still, but the stillest I ever feel is when I'm just moving for hours on end. So,
Abby, you got an answer to this one? Or you need to take a second.
I think it's more of a self-love for me, and taking that time out to just be in nature. It's not about the season. Summer, you find me out there, capturing those beautiful photos. They just make me feel good. That's why a lot of people hear me say you're my second favorite person because I'm number one actually. Just letting you guys know.
Let's just come on now, because Abby says this all the time in the office, and a lot of times we're like, who's number one? Who's number one?
Nah, I've outed myself.
You're number one.
I'm number one. Looking out for number one.
Your priorities are straight over there.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. Crystal Lee, I know we put you on the spot, but what do you have to say?
I would say I love my coworkers. Can I show you something if you guys see the YouTube?
You're going to people, but
one of the hosts here in Ottawa brought me a flower this morning.
What
on
is
his
going
bike.
on? You're holding up this...
And they have a little thing here so it doesn't die either, the water on the end.
Oh, Crystal Lee's holding up a rose, a red rose, and the vial on the end's got the water in it. So they made the effort to bring that even though they were on their bike?
Yes, they did. And they got it from a local florist. It was wrapped beautifully. It was on my chair when I went to go do the business report here in Ottawa. So it was very sweet.
Come
very nice.
on.
Aww. Yes.
I love that. All right, we're going to give you a pass and we're going to allow that because we said besides people and pets, but you got to shout out that person because it's too lovely. Too lovely. All right, we're going to actually get to business news now because I'm mindful of the time. So it is 6:42 and we're talking tariffs again today, but these are different ones. So these are the U.S. President Donald Trump signing the executive order for reciprocal tariffs. And this is more, globally. But what could those mean for Canada now?
So one part of this is Canada's digital services tax is being singled out here. So the White House sent out a document calling digital taxes in Canada and France unfair for taxing American companies. So a 3% digital services tax came into effect over the summer, and it requires large tech businesses to pay tax on revenues earned through engaging online users in Canada. Now, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has warned the tax would become a thorn in the side of the U.S., and it says the constant threats from Trump, the changing deadlines, and the moving goalposts is profoundly undermining business certainty here in Canada. So for more on this, here's Mark Warner, who is the principal counsel at Ma Law and is a Canadian and American trade lawyer.
I think the intent
as we're going to see for the next 4 years, is to keep the trading partners of the United States destabilized by constantly talking about tariffs. People making business decisions will have to evaluate that threat in terms of their investment planning. And I think that's a lot of what he's trying to do.
Now, the Business Council of Canada's CEO also says the tax continued to be an issue raised in meetings he had in Washington this week with senior U.S. officials. Now, the Trudeau government's last budget estimated the tax, which is retroactive for the first few years, would bring in about $6 billion, though, over 5 years. So it's not a small amount.
Speaking of those meetings in Washington, and I just want to mention right after we're done with the business news, we're going to move to hear what our Premier, Kinew, had to say about some of his meetings there. So that's coming up. You have another story, though, this morning about media and some major media companies that are suing a Canadian AI firm. What's happening?
Yes, so a group of U.S. media companies and the owner of the Toronto Star are suing artificial intelligence firm Cohere over copyright infringement. So publishers including Condé Nast, Forbes, and Guardian News allege the Toronto-based firm scraped their articles from the internet without the publisher's permission or compensation. And they allege Cohere then used the articles to train the large language models powering its AI services. So the media companies say publishers value the promise that artificial intelligence holds if ethically deployed. But they say Cohere improperly used publishers' creative labor and investments for the sake of its own profits. So the media companies are asking for Cohere to stop using their works for training AI models, along with up to $150,000 for every article they allege Cohere infringed. But a spokesperson for Cohere expects the court to side with the company. It says it has long worked to mitigate the risk of intellectual property infringement, and the company says we would have welcomed a conversation about their specific concerns and the opportunity to explain our enterprise-focused approach rather than learning about them in a filing.
And let's go back to today being Valentine's Day because it's the business report. Why don't we crunch the numbers? How much could it cost people if they are going to celebrate this?
Yes, well, it could cost you a little bit more this year. That's because the price of Valentine's Day chocolate is on the rise, as the price of cocoa has more than doubled since the beginning of last year. Flowers could also cost you more with unpredictable weather and supply chain issues influencing the price. And the Retail Council of Canada says fewer Canadians are planning to celebrate this year. But if they do, Canadians are expected to spend between $50 and $100 on gifts, dining, and other expenses. And many are choosing to shop local. And Marcy, last year Canadians spent about $98 on Valentine's Day.
What's going on in the market so far this morning?
In Europe, markets are lower after hitting record highs earlier this week. Germany is down, the UK is down, France is up. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan is down, Shanghai and Hong Kong are both up. Oil is up 47 cents to 71.76 US per barrel. Gold is down 70 cents to $2,927 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.05 of a cent to 70.5 cents US.
Well, you got to make sure that you tell that coworker that big props from Winnipeg, good move. I brought my coworker frozen pierogies this morning. I don't know if that counts.
Ooh, that's a pretty good present as well. I would have taken that too.
Yeah, he was pretty pleased. He was pretty pleased. All right, take care, Crystal. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Bye, Marcy.
It's Crystal Ramlichan with our business news. Now, she was mentioning the premiers. We know they were in Washington this week, all of them, including Kinew, the premier of Manitoba. They were there lobbying the Republican members of Congress and Trump officials to oppose the ongoing tariff threats. Now, Premier Kinew spoke with the press while in D.C. and was asked what Canada should do to renegotiate the tariff terms. Here's what he said.
Well, I'm interested in what Manitobans want and what Canadians want. And if you're going to ask me, I'd say we want more stops on the Taylor Swift Eras Tour. We want ChatGPT to help us with our kids' homework. There's tons of things that America has that Canadians want to get more of. But the message that we have here is that we're the Costco of critical minerals. And in order to keep the American economy moving forward, you need access to those raw materials. We are an energy superpower. that's right next door to the United States of America, whether that's the hydroelectricity that my province exports, whether that's oil and gas from some of my western neighbors. And so we have what America needs. And I think our long-term commitment is to ensure that this Canadian-American friendship really works and prospers for decades to come.
So that is Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew. You can follow him on Instagram. Maybe you already do. He shared more about what happened in Washington there yesterday, even mentioning that he came across Elon Musk while he was there. I have no idea in how much detail, or if it was just sort of a run and hello and an introduction. CBC's Bartley Kives, though, wanted to dig into some more detail about the impact of this meeting. So he spoke with Paul Thomas, Professor Emeritus of Political Studies at the University of Manitoba.
What do you make of the task facing Canada's premiers in attempting to lobby a government led by a person that clearly makes up his own mind regarding policy?
Well, the first thing I guess I'd say is that they need to give some reassurance to the publics they serve in their respective provinces and territories that they're making an effort to mitigate the damage, the terrible damage that will be done to the economies of the country by imposing tariffs, however steep they happen to be and however long in duration. So there's clearly some symbolic component to this. They're trying to make it clear that an effort is being made to mitigate the damages. I think all of them are realistic that when you're dealing with an erratic, combative, bullying, stubborn person like Donald Trump, that you're not likely to convert his mind to thinking that tariffs are a bad thing based on facts and evidence and arguments you put in front of him. The more he speaks about the topic, the more I think he convinces himself that his opinions are the right ones, and there's no doubt about it in his mind, and that he isn't persuadable. So I don't think anybody standing at the entrance to get into the White House was hoping they would leave saying, well, we made a mistake, and now we've heard from you. And the audience they had was with a lower-level public official or political official who probably doesn't have immediate and meaningful access to the president. So, yes, they were heard in the corridors of power, but the impact of that is likely to be limited.
Paul Thomas, Professor Emeritus of Political Studies at the University of Manitoba, in conversation with Bartley Kives there about what he makes of the Premier's visit to Washington, D.C. The Premier, by the way, Wab Kinew's on our show live next week for our monthly interview. We'll be able to ask him some more questions about that visit. In addition, on the program this morning, you're going to hear from former Governor-General of Canada, Michaëlle Jean, who's going to be talking about Trump, about all of his threats, about tariffs, about Flag Day. So stay tuned to hear why she says that she believes that we do need to take seriously what he's saying about our sovereignty, the threats to our sovereignty. So we'll hear what she has to say after 7. Right now it is 10 to 7 and it's minus 24 with ice crystals in Winnipeg. Brandon's mostly cloudy, minus 28, and in Thompson it is mainly clear and minus 39. So that extreme cold continues to the north and parts of southwest Manitoba as well, including Brandon and Dauphin. Well, next on the show, it is Valentine's Day, and a lot of the world's going to celebrate love. Next on the program, though, we're going to talk about a new study in social, psychological, and personality science, and it offers a bit of a twist on the idea that being single means you're unhappy. It suggests, though, that single women may actually be happier than single men. The study looks at a few reasons for that, including women having stronger social connections and tending to be more emotionally independent. Janine Hubbard's here to talk about it, registered psychologist. Good morning to you.
Good morning and happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Can you elaborate on this whole thing, single women being happier?
Absolutely. And I always like to give a few caveats anytime I'm talking about a research study, because while this is highlighting some really interesting findings, it's often, very much the first step to look at, okay, what's happening here? So, for example, they reported higher levels of satisfaction and happiness, and the authors suggested some reasons behind that, but that's not something that they actually assessed. And I think the other thing that's really important is they looked just at singles and in kind of looking for heterosexual relationships for the most part. And there's no comparison to similar individuals who are married or in a committed relationship.
So it's
we
flawed.
don't know.
It's flawed, but a good topic to chat about.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think it's a great one. It's
Yeah.
a great starting point. I'd love to know the data in terms of married versus single, because I think we might see some interesting reasons there. But some of the thought why women were reporting higher levels of happiness and satisfaction was they were looking at the traditional heterosexual marriage roles and sort of saying, you know what? That's often really unbalanced. And I get the burden of a lot of those activities. I mean, obviously, that's not every relationship, but there are a number of women sort of saying, I'm not really comfortable having that level, especially if I'm getting my social and emotional needs met in other ways, in particular through female friendships and connections. Whereas men have very different, traditionally different kind of social supports. They may engage in lots of social activities with their male friends, but they may not be getting their emotional needs met by friendship as opposed to a partnership, whereas women may feel quite satisfied having those needs met just with their female friends.
How can a single person, whether male or female, improve their emotional well-being on their own?
The emphasis here is to really focus in on your own happiness, your own self-love and self-care, and making sure that your needs are being met so that you can provide a partnership, so that you can go into something, if that's what you're looking for, kind of having assessed yourself, having assessed your needs, making sure you are feeling satisfied with where your life is in all other aspects. And then a relationship helps to enhance. It helps to benefit, but it's not going to solve all those other things that really, may take some therapy, may take some self-reflection, may take just I've been more isolated than I'd like after COVID, and I want to reach out and get more engaged in my community or classes or clubs or something so that I'm feeling connected.
How do the stigmas for single men and women differ?
Again, it depends on your family. It depends on your social network. But unfortunately, that perception of, well, he's a bachelor, he's still playing the field, and females with the idea of, well, it's a spinster. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you married? There must be a problem. Unfortunately, do still persist. In at least, like I say, in some networks. And that can be a really hard one to overcome for a lot of people.
And it's really interesting because then when you look back at what the study said, which is, that women, maybe at least some women might find connection easier than men if they're both single. On the other hand, there's more stigma against men if they're like traveling alone, I understand, versus women traveling alone, for example.
Again, it's really interesting, and I think it depends on kind of the environment or what's happening. But yes, you're right. There are some areas in which quite acceptable and normal for someone to go out, say, to the movies or to the theater or to a restaurant by themselves. And kind of what are some of those perceptions? The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and again, doesn't get fully explored, is, for example, desire for children or already having children. There is some interesting research that suggests that for both genders, once you're over the age of 40, your satisfaction and your comfort with your relationship status as single does seem to increase. And so whether that's just because you're in a more financially and employment, stability in your life, or whether some of that pressure around kids has passed, so that, that urgency in your 20s and 30s maybe has moved on in some different ways. I don't know. Again, this is why research is so interesting, because it raises more questions than it answers, I think.
Janine, thank you very much for this morning. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Take care.
You as well. That's Janine Hubbard, psychologist, just talking about this, as she said, interesting, not necessarily scientifically deeply based study, but it is a new study out in the Social, Psychological and Personality Science document that talks about levels of happiness among single men versus single women. It is now 3 minutes to 7 o'clock. Lauren Donnelly's back live from our news center this morning with headlines.
Good morning. People in a small northern Manitoba community say high prices are keeping them from accessing medical services. There is no doctor in Leaf Rapids. Residents can pay upwards of $350 to travel to Thompson for care. The Northern Regional Health Authority says the virtual and in-person care available complies with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Manitoba's standards. And Kinew says that cross-border relationships are in a better place after his trip to Washington this week with other premiers, but one expert has a different take. We'll hear what one U of M professor made of the visit. Your next local CBC News is after World Report.
All right, thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Marcy.
It is in Winnipeg minus 24, and it's going to feel today like about minus 32 this morning. Our actual high is minus 17. It's not that bad when everything stays calm, actually. I found yesterday afternoon a little more bearable than earlier in the week with the wind. So today's wind will be northeast about 20 with a mix of sun and cloud for us. We, of course, have that extreme cold warning that remains in effect, though, for Brandon, Dauphin, Gimli, much of the south. This excludes Winnipeg today. And in northern Manitoba, a lot of communities including all the way up through Churchill, and wind chills around minus 45 and minus 50. So it's going to remain brisk, which is excellent for Festival de Voyageur here in Winnipeg. And we're going to hear more about those snow sculptures coming up still ahead in the program. In addition, in the next hour of Information Radio, we're going to hear from Governor General of Canada, Michaëlle Jean, former Governor General, about Flag Day and the importance of showing national pride in the face of Donald Trump's threats. Also, what she has to say about how seriously we should be taking some of those threats, including the one to our sovereignty, the biggest reason that Canadians are probably concerned right now. So what does she think? That's coming up after 7 o'clock. In addition, in the next hour of the show, a Winnipegger who's been playing disc golf for over 100 weeks straight is going to be part of our Show Us Your Winter contest. And then why some University of Manitoba students say that Manitoba's largest university has become a commuter campus. You finish your class and you're out of there with a lack of a sense of community. But we're going to hear how students are trying to rebuild that.
Today on The Current.
I'm very encouraged by the nature of the Canadian response.
Former Canadian prime ministers are rallying around the flag, urging Canadians to put their patriotism on display. Joe Clark will be here to talk about how Canada should stand up to Donald Trump's threat to take over this country, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Sam Sampson. We begin in Munich, where world leaders, high-ranking officials, and security experts are meeting today. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly is there, as is U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. And as Abby Kugadassan reports, the war in Ukraine is at the forefront of the Global Security Conference.
3 days in Munich will allow European officials to meet and mingle with the U.S. delegation for the first time since Donald Trump returned to the White House.
Europeans will use this opportunity to try to get a sense of the U.S. administration.
Raphael Loss is with the European Council on Foreign Relations in Berlin. He says world leaders and high-ranking officials take to the main stage of the security conference in southern Germany.
But much more will happen in the back rooms, on the hallways.
Much of the talk will focus on a pressing issue for Europeans: what happens next in Ukraine. In recent days, Trump has confirmed speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin, announcing the two had agreed to start negotiations immediately. Trump has also suggested Ukraine won't get all of its territory back from the Kremlin. And his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, set off even more alarm bells by saying NATO membership for Kyiv is off the table.
That they've basically conceded on many of the core demands that Vladimir Putin laid out when he started.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeated the need for a lasting and reliable peace, one where security guarantees backed by the U.S. ensure his country is not attacked again. And EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas reiterated concerns emerging from various capitals across the continent.
It is clear that any deal behind our backs will not work. Clear that appeasement also always fails.
There's confusion, too, about whether U.S. troops would join peacekeeping soldiers from the EU if and when a ceasefire is negotiated. Europe wants to know exactly how much Trump is willing to do on the world stage to uphold the existing rules-based order as he pushes for a more isolationist America. Abby Kualdasan, CBC News, Berlin.
U.S. President Donald Trump continues to follow through with his threat to apply tariffs to steel and aluminum, not just for Canada, but all countries. And he's warning of reciprocal tariffs on America's global trading partners over a wide range of practices he sees as unfair. That includes Canada's DST, or Digital Services Tax. Cameron McIntosh joins me from our Washington bureau. So, Cam, what is the DST?
It's a 3% tax Canada puts on large digital firms, all for doing business in Canada. Now, it came in last June amid concerns foreign digital companies were operating in Canada for free. The Parliamentary Budget Office estimates the tax will bring in more than $7 billion over 5 years. Of course, tech companies oppose it. So do many others, including the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, which says in the long run, it only increases costs for consumers.
So why is Trump so fixated on this?
To be fair, the U.S. has always opposed it, saying it unfairly targets American firms. President Biden even started a challenge under the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement. But it is exactly the type of tax President Trump singles out as unfair to America, insisting reciprocal global tariffs will level the playing field. Now, a White House fact sheet went even further, saying only America should be allowed to tax American firms. For those trying to keep score at home, this is in addition to the other tariffs Trump is threatening against Canada. Again, the president was very clear. For Canada, this could all be avoided. Just become the 51st state. Sam?
Cameron McIntosh from Washington. Thanks, Cam.
My pleasure.
New details have emerged about a story that made global headlines. In April of 2023, thieves stole more than $20 million in gold bars from the Air Canada cargo facility at Pearson Airport, northwest of Toronto. Now, the CBC's Fifth Estate has obtained copies of alleged conversations between the suspects. More from Fifth Estate co-host Stephen D'Souza.
This story is a sensational one.
That's Peel Regional Police Chief Nishan Duriyappa last spring, when officers charged 9 men in connection with the heist. One of the suspects, Arsalan Chaudhry.
He was integral. He was the main person, I would say.
Detective Sergeant Mike Mavity heads up the investigation. He alleges Chaudhry helped deal with the gold after it was stolen.
Had access to it, and I believe helped take that gold and make it into currency or a usable amount of money. Like if everyone.
The Fifth Estate also obtained an internal document detailing fresh allegations against the suspects. During the theft at the Air Canada cargo facility, the document suggests Chaudhry was at a nearby airport hotel and contacted the other suspects more than 800 times. The internal document was obtained from a source close to the case. It's a draft from last June that's a snapshot of the investigation. The evidence has not been tested in court as accurate or reliable. It includes an alleged text conversation about 2 months after the heist. The document says a suspect texts Chaudhry. They took all of it. Chaudhry replies, thought they would. The internal document says it shows the suspects sold a portion of the gold to eager buyers. Chaudhry is believed to be in Dubai. The suspects in Canada have not entered pleas and no trial date has been set. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
The full investigation, Inside Job Airport Gold Heist, airs tonight on the Fifth Estate at 9 p.m. on CBC and CBC Gem, or watch it on YouTube this afternoon at 1 p.m. To politics now, the first debate of the Ontario election campaign takes place today. The leaders of the province's 4 main parties will be in North Bay, focusing on issues specific to that region. As Lisa Shing reports, it's something people there say has long been neglected.
They need to advance work on reconciliation.
Sherry Taylor is the chief of Ganugamian First Nation, about 300 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay, Ontario. She wants the party that comes into power to focus more on communities like hers.
Our young people are dying. There's suicides, there's overdoses. There needs to be more detox treatment centers.
Like elsewhere in the province, healthcare is a major issue in the north. Tens of thousands don't have a family doctor there. The Ontario Medical Association says half of the physicians in the region will retire within 5 years. Dr. Danica Switzer travels between communities to help with the shortage.
Patients are foregoing care, and that's maybe the most dangerous potentially to their health.
access to social programs, infrastructure demands, and the environment are also concerns. And PC leader Doug Ford wants to develop the vast mineral-rich region called the Ring of Fire, which will involve building roads, billions in investment, and working with Indigenous communities.
Where's the government for us?
David Tabachnik is a political science professor at Nipissing University in North Bay.
But what I am looking for is a long-term vision, not just promises for one project here and a funding announcement there.
The Greens, Liberals, NDP, and PCs are promising to get everyone a family doctor. Many up north say they'll wait and see once the election is over. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
It takes two for a program in New Brunswick to work. Nursing Homes Without Walls matches volunteers with seniors in their communities. Jonna Brewer has the story of one match that blossomed into a special relationship.
Brenda Trafford is working on her latest felt pieces in one of her craft rooms at her home in Murray Corner, New Brunswick. Brenda, who will soon be 90 years old, has been a crafter for decades. It's kept her busy since her husband died several years ago. This home that they shared is special to her, and she couldn't imagine ever leaving. So when she heard about Nursing Homes Without Walls, she signed up immediately. Little did she know that one particular phone call would change her life.
I received a call on a Monday, and it was a male voice. And my musical mind went, "Ooh, that's an interesting sounding voice."
That voice was program volunteer David Steele. David is a widower and was looking for ways to give back to the community as a senior. He was not looking for love, but then he met Brenda.
She had a very nice phone voice too, which kind of impressed me. When I found out she was a crafter, that was a big plus on her part, and eventually Brenda and I decided we kind of liked each other.
Brenda and David have been together now for 4 years. They still live independently, going back and forth to each other's homes. It's a perfect arrangement, says Brenda.
I wasn't looking. I thought that was part of my life was over. And I'm lucky that it happened.
Jonna Brewer, CBC News, Murray Corner, New Brunswick.
And that is the latest from World Report. This month, we're asking you to follow World Report wherever you get your podcasts. It'll help you stay on top of the day's big stories. I'm Sam Sampson.
Well, cue the love songs, right? It's Valentine's Day, everybody. Welcome to Friday, and thanks for joining us here in Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM. 9:90 a.m. on the app and on YouTube. So good morning, everybody. This hour on the program, we are going to be talking to former Governor General of Canada, Michaëlle Jean, about Flag Day tomorrow, but also about the threats coming from the United States. And it will be very interesting to hear what she has to say about sovereignty in this nation and how seriously she thinks we should take that threat about being absorbed as the 51st state. So that interview is coming up for you. Also this hour on the show, a Winnipegger has been playing disc golf for over 100 weeks straight. He's not letting winter stop him. We'll find out more as he shows us his winter. It's part of an ongoing series and contest we have. And why some U of M students say Manitoba's largest universities become a commuter campus with no sense of community. They're trying to rebuild it. And CBC's Gavin Axelrod's going to be on with a special report. So that's all coming up. Right now, let's go to other news and headlines developing this Friday morning with Lauren Donnelly.
Good morning, Marcy. A Manitoba chiropractor has been charged with 8 counts of voyeurism after hidden cameras were found in his office. Dr. Robert Stitt is no longer practicing and his license is suspended. In January 2024, a patient complained to the Manitoba Chiropractors Association, alleging Stitt inappropriately touched her back. While investigating that complaint, the regulatory body learned that Stitt had been recording his interactions with patients and called Winnipeg police. The CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargut has that story in your 7:30 news. And one woman in a small northern community says she's been out of work for 3 years because she can't afford to travel to her medical appointments. With no doctor in Leaf Rapids, residents have to travel to Thompson for care, a journey that can cost upwards upwards of $350. Your next local news is at 7:30.
Thanks, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Now with quick weather traffic, here's Abby and then Corey.
Minus 24 in Winnipeg, a few clouds hanging around. We see a mix of sun and clouds today. The high we are at minus 17 and the wind chill feels like minus 32 outside. So you want to take care. Frostbite might just creep up on you in minutes.
As for the commute, pretty quiet out there. Haven't heard of any major issues. Heard from down on a bike. That's a lovely day to bike, minus the cold, especially on the Southwest Rapid Transit. But if you do see something going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving on the highways of the road, sidewalks, bike lanes, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, tomorrow is an opportunity, if you choose to do so, to show your national pride. Not only does Team Canada face off against the U.S. in hockey in that Four Nations Cup, if you're a sports fan, but it is Flag Day, rather. That is when 60 years ago our current flag was raised for the first time on Parliament Hill. But it's also Flag Day with different significance, because earlier this week, as you likely know by now, 5 former prime ministers signed a letter calling on Canadians to show the flag as never before in the face of Donald Trump's threats. For a closer look at this story, I had an interesting conversation earlier this morning with former Governor General Michaëlle Jean.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. What a moment, this letter by these 5 former prime ministers. What did you make of it?
Well, the letter is interesting and the initiative is great. To have 5 former prime ministers calling on Canadians to proudly fly the flag, and not as an act of nationalism or patriotism, but as a reaffirmation of our shared purpose. You know, unlike nations built on rigid identities, Canada has never been a homogenized society. We are a vast and diverse land shaped by many landscapes and humanscapes, where different histories, cultures, and peoples have come together in an ongoing, evolving dialogue. So our flag represents a commitment. A commitment to what? A commitment to inclusion, a commitment to justice, and a commitment to action, taking action together. And Canada is a work in progress. So something we must build and defend like every day. And again, I like this idea of defining the purpose of Canada as inclusion for justice.
How needed is it at this time? I mean, it might sound like a silly question. You were quite vocal during Trump's first administration when he used crude language when talking about immigrants from Haiti specifically and other African countries. I mean, how concerned are you about Trump's policies this term?
Well, what you are referring to was such an insult, calling African countries and my native land shithole countries. That's the words he used. And we were all offended, and I did react to that. And I believe that we need to remain very, very vigilant, because for Donald Trump, to even speak of absorbing Canada as a 51st U.S. state means that he doesn't respect Canada's sovereignty. His driving force is something like a feverish, thirst for conquest. It's not something like it. It is that, a feverish thirst for conquest, imperialist and neocolonial ambitions expressed through bizarre pronouncements. Seizing Greenland, taking control of the Panama Canal, or even taking control of Gaza. Now an open air, graveyard, the scene of carnage, where hundreds of bodies still lie beneath the rubble, to turn it into a luxury, seaside city, an Israeli-American Riviera. After first deporting the 2 million traumatized Palestinians who still live there to neighboring Arab countries, who are themselves, very disturbed by this kind of idea. So yeah, he has no respect for the humankind. He believes that history starts with him. That's the way he sees things.
So let me ask you the sovereignty question then, because there are a lot of Canadians right now, as you well know, sitting around sitting on the couch, sitting around the dinner tables, maybe watching the news at the end of the night, and having a conversation about someone will say, we don't have to be that serious about our sovereignty. That's just, bluster, rhetoric. He's trying to make a deal. And others saying, we need to lean into this moment in a serious way like we never have before. How do you respond to that? Like, what do you think Canadians should make of these threats and about making Canada a 51st state?
I think we have to take it very seriously because he will persist. His economic attacks like tariffs, trade barriers, and political destabilization are calculated strategies to weaken our independence. So one thing that we need to say, to keep in mind, is that Canada has never been passive. By nature, we persist, we resist, and we act. We will not be forced into submission, nor will we allow external pressures to define our future. So I think maybe one call of action could be reflect, connect, and build bridges. Flag Day is more than a celebration; it's a moment of reflection. What role do each of us play in strengthening, this country? The work of Canada is never finished. It is up to us to continue the journey together. So maybe we could take a few moments to reflect on the bridges we need to build with the rest of the world, not just with the United States, but the rest of the world, within our community, between communities, across regions, in all our own hearts. But also, we probably need to diversify and reinforce our relationships, with the rest of the world, definitely.
Thank you so much for speaking to some of the anxieties, and of course also to some of your feelings about what tomorrow is going to be like on Flag Day. What a pleasure and an honor to speak with you this morning, Michaëlle Jean. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a conversation I had with Michaëlle Jean a little earlier this morning, former Governor General of Canada. And if you want to weigh in on Flag Day, I know a lot of you are sharing what you're feeling about it and whether or not you'll be raising a flag, why or why not. So you can do that on Facebook, or you can continue to call us if you'd like. Our listener line is 788-3205.
For breaking news as it happens, stay with CBC News. For the latest updates and what it means for Canadians, stay with CBC News. When the biggest stories break, both at home and around the world, stay with CBC News.
It is right now 7:19 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and on YouTube. And next on the program, what do you do when you feel disconnected from your culture? For one Winnipeg woman, the answer was simple, but the execution was epic. Interdisciplinary artist Tracy Charette-Fair first dove into her family history and then looked to other Métis women to help. Now, the result of all of this exploration is a massive 63-foot textile art installation honoring 400 Métis women, past, present, and all stitched together, literally. The piece is called Honoring Our Métis Mothers. It's going to be officially unveiled this Saturday at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and Tracy joins us via Zoom to talk more about how it was created and the meaning behind it. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how was it created?
It was created by a group of Métis women, and we are Red River Métis from across the country, here locally, even beyond our borders, into the U.S. All Métis people that have originated here and have gone to other parts when we were dispersed as a Métis nation. So we're coming back together. We're stitching our lives back together. We're stitching our histories back together, and we're honoring the women of the Métis Nation. So it's been incredible. It's just been amazing.
So you invited people to sessions, and they had fabric squares. People might imagine a quilt in their heads, although this is very differently designed. And the idea was that each person would stitch a name. Is that correct?
Right. So what had happened is I had done a 250, a Heartbeat of a Nation in 2021, where I made 250 handmade bowls. And a year later at the St. Boniface Museum gifted those bowls to Métis people. And I asked in return that they give me the name of a Métis woman that they wanted to honor. So I was sitting on all these names and thinking, I can't do this by myself, for one. I need the community to help me. And then also thinking, what a wonderful way it would be for us to come together in stitching and beading circles the way that we would have done. And it's a resurgence right now, too, where it's happening more and more in communities. But I thought it'd be a wonderful way of us connecting and reviving those relationships that our grandmothers or our mothers had before we became so far apart from each other. So what I did was we launched the project last year, February 17th, on Louis Riel Day, and at the St. Boniface Museum, which hosted us for the first 6 months of the first 5 months of the project. We met weekly at the St. Boniface Museum. And it was kind of a little bit of a slow start. We had about 50 people at the launch. We had fiddling in the background because there was a Métis fiddler there that day. And there was a lot of enthusiasm, and there was a lot of tears. People were really emotional about recognizing their mothers, their grandmothers. A lot of these women could not admit that they were Métis. There was so much shame and so much discrimination that many of us would go to great lengths to deny our culture and to deny our identity. So part of
I'm just going to interject there for a moment, if I may, because sitting with these women, as you said, delving so deeply into their own histories and their own feelings, as I just have this image of women, as you said, weeping and stitching and talking. And what was it like for you to reconnect with your own Métis family?
Well, for me, it was what happened is my mother passed away when I was 6.5 years old. And when I lost her, or we lost her, we lost our Métis family. My aunties, my grandfather, all of the time that we'd spent growing up in this little Métis community of La Rochelle. And so that was my disconnection. Coming back to them later in life, they had all moved out to BC, was a huge revelation for me. I always felt like I was on the sidelines. I didn't really fit where I was. I'm settler side too. My dad's family is Mennonite, but I never felt like I fit. When I came back with my aunts and sat with them and laughed, and I felt I was home. I felt that I had been missing this most of my life. And there's so many things that, the way we look, the way we talk, the way we speak. My aunts were French speaking. Growing up, we'd lost the language. A couple of my aunts completely lost the language because they were embarrassed to speak their language, which was very much a Michif French. And so it was really embracing that and really feeling like, I felt home. And I wanted other people to have that experience of feeling like they belong. And that the women that maybe could not recognize their heritage, their identity, would be able to come back into the community and heal some of that shame and heal that feelings of being lost and not belonging.
And what a moment this will be to have the names of all of these women stitched by all of these other women all together and unveiled in this in this piece tomorrow. Tracy, thank you so much. Have a peaceful weekend and enjoy the unveiling of this tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
It's just beautiful. It's just beaded and colorful and full of stories and those meaningful names. And if you look at it, it's kind of like hangs like a long sort of banner, but it looks like a sash in a river moving through. Tracy Charette-Fair is the interdisciplinary artist behind Honoring Our Métis Mothers. So that unveiling we're referring to, all that work leading up to it, it's being unveiled officially tomorrow, February 15th at the Winnipeg Art Gallery at 1 o'clock. So if you want to check it out there, you can. And that will extend, I believe, through Louis Riel Day on Monday. 7:26, we got to move along here on the program because Scott Regehr is waiting for us to talk about sports and hockey in particular. Good morning to you.
Hey there, Marcy.
How'd things go in hockey last night?
Well, about the way you'd expect at the Four Nations face-off. The U.S., heavy favorites heading into their game against Finland, and then thumped the Finns 6-1. Fans in Montreal, Marcy, were asked to behave during the national anthems. So how'd that go?
Oh, say, can you see?
Some booing for sure, something that's become commonplace in Canadian rinks since the Donald Trump trade tariff announcements. Following the game, American star Matthew Tkachuk, who scored twice last night, was asked what he thought.
I didn't like it, and that's all I got.
Oh, all right then. Tkachuk, if he didn't like the reception his team got last night, he best brace for tomorrow when it's Canada they will face, and on the 60th anniversary of the Maple Leaf being placed on the Canadian flag to boot. Even without the background politics, this is expected to be the game of the tournament, Marcy, between arguably the planet's two best hockey-playing nations at the moment. There will be no Valentine's exchange between increasingly bitter North American rivals tomorrow.
Yeah, it's gonna be one to watch. See what that sounds like, what that looks like. To kinder and gentler things now. Today marks the beginning of the Tournament of Hearts. What stands out for you as the Canadian Women's Curling Championship gets underway?
Well, one, the Homan Empire, Rachel Homan out of Ottawa. She won last year's Scotties, went undefeated, and since then has only lost 6 times. None of those losses to Canadian opponents, so she's the one to beat. Lots of Manitoba representation, Marcy. Gimli's Carrie Anerson, Winnipeg's Caitlin Laws, both pre-qualified based on last year's rankings. Kate Cameron, also of Winnipeg, won the provincial playdowns to round out the trio. In fact, all 3 rinks are in the same pool. Manitoba, the most successful province at the Tournament of Hearts in terms of podium finishes, tied for second most wins behind Team Canada, although many of those Canadian Team Canada wins were Manitobans. Jennifer Jones comes to mind. All 3 teams are in action on Saturday. Laws against Quebec, Cameron against the NWT, and Anerson battling out against Newfoundland and Labrador.
Finally, what other sports stories are you watching heading into this weekend?
Canada's swimming sweetheart, Summer McIntosh. She's at it again, Marcy, at an event last night in Florida. She posted one of the fastest ever times in the 800-meter freestyle. So fast, she would have won gold with it at the Paris Olympics. Here's the staggering bit. McIntosh didn't even compete in the 800 free at the Games because she wanted to save energy for other events she thought she had a better chance in. And finally, the Dominican love song Amor a Distancia, Love at a Distance. There's been considerable distance between the Blue Jays and their Dominican superstar Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on a new contract, Marcy. And if Vladdy isn't signed to an extension this Valentine's weekend, he says he's headed for free agency. So, if you catch the apple of your eye this weekend, constantly checking their smartphone rather than fawning at you, cut them some slack. And I promise I'm not projecting.
Look at you, dropping all the Valentine's Day nods in sports. I'm liking it, Scott Regar.
My wife is a longtime CBC producer. She may have influenced my scripts this morning.
That was sweet. Tell her she did an awesome job. I love it.
All right, well, thank you for that.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too.
That's Scott Regar with help from his partner this morning in Morning Sports. It is brisk and chilly Friday morning, and coming up, we're going to talk about how you don't care. You're getting out there anyway. We asked you to show us your winter, and we're going to hear from a man who is going to tell us all about playing disc golf out in the cold. That's after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Lauren Donnelly in Winnipeg at 7:30. It's minus 25 degrees with ice crystals at the Winnipeg airport. A mix of sun and cloud today, a high of minus 17. A Winnipeg chiropractor has been charged with voyeurism after hidden cameras were found in his practice. The I-Team's Caroline Bargut has that story.
Dr. Robert Stitt, a longtime Winnipeg chiropractor, is now suspended and charged with 8 counts of voyeurism. This comes after discoveries were made by the chiropractor's regulatory body. In early 2024, a woman alleged Stitt inappropriately touched her back. According to search warrant documents obtained by CBC News, a Manitoba Chiropractors Association investigator spoke to Stitt about the allegations. He told them he could prove he did nothing wrong because he recorded all patient interactions. Stitt then scrolled through video looking for the incident, and the investigator saw at least 3 women in stages of undress and called Winnipeg police. Police searching Stitt's office found 5 fake sprinkler heads in the ceiling that concealed cameras. The regulatory body says Stitt will be suspended until his case is resolved. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The lawyer for a Manitoba man found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his neighbor says he plans to appeal. Eric Wildman pleaded not guilty to the June 2021 death of 40-year-old Clifford Joseph. Joseph's remains were found more than a month after he had been reported missing. Prosecutors say he was killed by gunshots, including one to the back of the head. Martin Glazer is a lawyer representing Wildman. He says his client maintains his innocence.
This is just the first round. We're going to keep fighting. And as far as we're concerned, justice was not served.
During the trial, prosecutors alleged Wildman hit Joseph with his vehicle when he caught him trying to steal from his property in the village of Stead. They say he then took Joseph to a different location where he executed him. Glazer says a sentencing date has not been set. Residents in a small northern Manitoba community lack the money needed to travel for medical services. With no doctor and only one nurse at the clinic in Leaf Rapids, residents often pay upwards of $350 to travel 200 kilometers to Thompson or 80 kilometers to Lynn Lake. Victoria Chaboyer has been out of work for 3 years because she can't afford to travel to her medical appointments.
You have to pay out about $350 to get a ride, and if you don't have that money on you, you have to put your health care aside and just keep what you got to survive for food.
The Northern Regional Health Authority says the virtual and in-person care available complies with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Manitoba's standards. The Health Authority says it is not responsible for providing transportation services, and under its reimbursement policy, patients must pay travel expenses up front. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says Canada-U.S. relations are in a better place after a trip down to Washington, but U of M politics professor Paul Thomas questions the value of the visit. Kinew and other premiers met with U.S. government officials in an effort to strengthen the relationship. While they were there, President Donald Trump reiterated his desire to absorb Canada into the U.S.
This is a unique period of time when we have power concentrated in the hands of a single somewhat deranged actor in Donald Trump who doesn't listen to many people.
Thomas called it a sad spectacle as the premiers met with mostly low-level officials. Kinew says the premiers spoke to U.S. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, someone he says has been to Manitoba many times. In South Korea, where officials are confirming at least 6 people were killed following a fire that ignited at a resort construction site today. The site is located in the port city of Busan. Reports also say about 100 people were evacuated with several injured. There are fears the death toll could climb much higher. Finally, Parliament in France has voted to ban single-use e-cigarettes. The new law says it aims to protect the health of the youngest and end the production of polluting waste. That is your CBC News from Winnipeg.
All right, thanks very much, Lauren.
You're welcome, Marcy.
Lauren Donnelly filling in for Heather this morning, and now to our regional forecast on CBC, and that means Abby Adiemi's taking over.
Yeah, the multi-day stretch of very cold wind chills continues across the province. We're seeing extreme cold warnings in effect across southern and northern Manitoba this morning as that cold snap continues. Brandon, Dauphin, Gimli, all the way we're seeing minus 40s, the wind chills in that area, and that would continue into the weekend. In the northern part of the province, we're seeing minus 50 in Churchill at this time, the wind chill values. In Winnipeg at this time, minus 24. Expect a mix of sun and clouds. Wind chills around minus 32 this morning. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region, more than all the way down to the U.S. border. We're seeing temperatures around minus 17. Wind chills will be feeling like minus 33 this morning. Heading west to Brandon, minus 27 at this time. The wind chill feels like minus 38. We have that extreme cold warning in effect for the Westman region. Similar in the Parkland region, also under extreme cold warning, minus 32 at this time. Wind chills around minus 43. In the Interlake region, Gimli and surrounding areas hovering around minus 31, minus 32 at this time. The wind chill feels like minus 42 this morning. The Parkland Flon, good morning. You're at minus 38 at this time. Wind chill feels like minus 45. Some areas feeling like minus 50 for that part of the province. Up north in Thompson, minus 35 at this time. The wind chills around minus 45. Further north, Churchill seeing ice crystals at minus 37. The wind chill feels like -50 for folks in Churchill this morning, so take care. This deep freeze, I see it is going to extend down south later as we get into the weekend. So I'll just tell you, take very good care of yourself.
No doubt. All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can all, I can't imagine being without shelter. This is crazy stuff out there. 7:36 a.m. is the time. Corey Funk is here, and he's here to talk about the commute. Have you heard anything about the roads?
It's been really quiet out there. I guess
good.
Everyone booked Valentine's Day off or something like that. I don't
Maybe
know.
extra long weekend.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense. Yeah, very quiet. Haven't heard of any major issues. One maybe issue if you're up north around Thompson, making your way to Gillam or Lynn Lake. Looks like there's some visibility issues according to Manitoba 511. Might be some covered highway conditions, so be careful. Other than that, down south here, no major issues to report. But if you see something, if you're walking, biking, driving, you want to tell us about your lovely commute, like Dan on a Bike did. He said it's a great day to bike, minus if you bundle up, of course. Give me a call 204-788-3093.
Well, just before you think we broke something in this cold, I'm going to let you know what we're listening to there. That's the sound of Mike Evans practicing his short game surrounded by snow. He plays disc golf with his friends all year round, even when it's -30 below. He says the sport helps take the sting out of the cold. And what we're hearing there is the disc actually going into the metal chain basket, which is effectively the end goal of each and every hole. He says, as I mentioned, that he loves getting out and doing this, and so much so that starting in 2021, since starting it, since 2021, Mike has helped start Disc Golf Manitoba, and he's the chair of the nonprofit organization. He is part of our Show Us Your Winter contest, and he wrote in about how disc golf gets him through the winter. And you're going to get a special treat while Mike and I are talking, because he joins us via Zoom. But if you're watching on YouTube, then you're going to also see some video of disc golf and some pictures that Mike shared with us, so that'll be fun. And he's here to talk. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I love what's behind you. So this is for radio listeners. You got this wall of different colored. It looks like frisbees. Are those all discs for the game?
Yes, they are. I have a slight problem. I like to collect, and this is a product of all that collecting.
It's not a problem, Mike. It's a passion. I love it. So for those that don't know disc golf, we better just go through the rules. How does it work? How do you play?
Yeah, so it's very, very similar to ball golf, as we call it. You've got a tee, and generally it's about 300 feet or less away from the basket in most of our courses in Manitoba, and the basket is the target instead of the hole. And the object of the game, just as in ball golf, is to try to get par or better. So quite simple. Walking, no carts in terms of motor carts. You might have carts to carry your disc, backpacks to carry your disc. There's a good picture of someone teeing off right there. Yeah. And ideally you can get close to the basket in a single shot and pop it in there for a birdie.
How heavy is the disc, and are you throwing it like one would imagine a frisbee? Same technique or slightly different?
Very similar technique. The discs themselves range from about 150 grams would be considered a lightweight disc, and then the maximum weight disc is 180 grams.
How much has it taken off since you started this officially?
Well, 2021, I joined the crowd, so to speak, during the pandemic when everyone was isolating, so to speak. I started just as a means to walk my dog as I got tired of walking around my neighborhood. So LeBarriere Park is very close to my home. So I would go out there and do 2 spins around the park. Great park, great course there. Takes about an hour and 15 minutes for one person to get through. Started meeting people in the park, and suddenly I had a bunch of friends that turned into people that I would get together routinely. And then I started to get involved in Disc Golf Manitoba, and which I now have such a passion. I chair the organization, which is a non-for-profit that's focused on helping to foster the growth of the game in Manitoba.
Where else do you guys play? Like disc golf, you mentioned LeBarriere Park. Where else are there actual courses for this and the basket set up and such?
Yeah, there's 40 there's over 40 courses in Manitoba. Almost like many of the municipalities have been putting them in over the last several years. And in Winnipeg, I'll call it Winnipeg, City of Winnipeg courses. There's Happyland Park. Kilcona Park has 2 courses. One's called Lakes, the other one's called Outback. And then we've got LeBarriere Park. And there's another one just on the other side of the city, closer to the airport at CFB Winnipeg, called 17 Wing. And all of these courses that are in Winnipeg, if you don't, me telling you where they are, there's an application that you can use on your phone, look online, called UDisc, UDISC.
Okay.
That's your gateway into information about courses all over the globe. But yeah.
I love that. I love also that you mentioned courses, just people can check it out. You said it quickly, but you mentioned courses that are like north, south, east, and west in Winnipeg as well. So people are looking to get out. There's something in your neighborhood potentially here. Let's talk about the actual, why we're talking to you this morning. You're part of our series, which is Show Us Your Winter. How does this sport and the community that you shared and now had, joined up with, how does it help you get through the winter?
Yeah, I think for like most people, if you have a passion for the sport, period, you might contemplate going out in the winter. I have a dog, so I get out and walk her constantly. That's one of the reasons that gets me out. But the love of the game, mostly camaraderie, playing with other people, and also I think discussions with people that I do play with. It's kind of like taking control of winter on your own terms, making it as fun as you can. Don't let winter control you. You control winter, taking on the elements, so to speak. And, honing your skills, there's nothing more difficult than playing disc golf in the winter. Your footing is terrible generally. Discs can get very, obviously, wet. And, yeah, it's far more challenging in the winter. And ideally, you start the spring, a couple steps ahead of the competition.
What's the coldest weather you've gone out and played in?
I've been out there with true -30, -40 wind chill, lots of times.
Lots of bragging rights. In terms of how popular the game is, are you getting new players, would you say, each and every year, every time sort of someone, comes out, maybe even like today, and starts talking about it?
Definitely. Yeah, there's always new faces. There's a very large contingent of what we'll call casual players who are not necessarily involved in Disc Golf Manitoba, won't know about Disc Golf Manitoba. So this is helpful in terms of getting our organization's name out there, because, yes, we are stewards of the sport within the province, but we also facilitate and organize lots of competitions throughout Winnipeg. And if the competition is something you're interested in, you want to come to talk to us. We got a Facebook presence, so social media, which is DGM Group. You can go there, and that's kind of the community platform where like-minded disc golfers go to discuss and find out what's going on.
Excellent. I'll point people there and repeat that again. Thanks so much for being part of our discussions about winter this morning, Mike. And good luck with your competitions moving forward with disc golf. Appreciate having you on.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the time.
Nice to talk to you again. That is Mike Evans, who's been with us this morning, an avid disc golfer and chair of Disc Golf Manitoba, so DGM Group. You can check them out on Facebook and social pages. And we are interviewing Mike this morning as part of our series as well, about asking you to show us your winter and what it is that you do to get through the colder months. Do you do something outside like Mike does, or are you more of an indoor cat, so to speak? No matter what it is, let us know. So we want you to send us a picture or a short video to win@cbc.ca. So many of us, you did already, to be honest. We're going to stretch this all into next week. We're going to wrap the contest today, but it's stretched to at least early next week because we want to share more entries. So win@cbc.ca is the place to share with us. Everyone who sends us something is entered. We're going to draw a name at random next week, and then we'll send that person a fabulous CBC Winter Prize pack. Tune in to next week as well on the shows. We're going to hear why Jim Agapito says winter's gone to the dogs. So he's got a story coming up for us. And we'll share more of what you've written to us. Show us your winter at CBC.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your world tonight, Every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1. On demand on the CBC Listen app and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Still ahead, we're going to talk about Festival de Voyageur. It starts tonight. They'll be happy about the cold. And to our healthcare series. After 8, personal care homes don't always have the reputation of being home-like. A former Winnipegger is pushing to change that, and also talk more about small care homes. How could they change how you age? How could they help also with backlogs in our healthcare system, where people, as we heard yesterday, sometimes get stuck in the hospitals waiting to get into a care home? So stay tuned. That's coming up as part of our series After 8. Right now, though, hitting the books is an important part of university life, of course, but so is finding experiences outside of the classroom. But how do you do that when people don't always want to stick around after the classes end? CBC's Gavin Axelrod recently spent some time at the University of Manitoba, where students and community members are trying to tackle that issue. They're looking to rebuild the social culture coming out of the pandemic. I spoke to Gavin yesterday after the show. Good morning.
Morning, Marcy. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming in. So how did this story come to your attention when you were at U of M?
So we just wrapped up our Communities in Focus program at the University of Manitoba. We were there for a couple weeks at the end of January into the beginning of February. And one thing we heard even before we got onto campus was that social life at the university and the culture there was suffering. And that knowing where to go or to meet others to have a good time can be hard, and it's not always easy to figure out where you can go to have those experiences. And so one of the people I spoke to for his perspective on this story was Daniel Ahmed. Right now, he's the business manager for IQs, which is a campus cafe owned by the University of Manitoba Students' Union, also known as UMSU.
Is that right in UMSU, like right when you walk in? IQs?
So it's just upstairs, actually, yeah. So there's
That one.
there's like the food court on the main level, and then you go upstairs, and then there's IQs, degrees, all the restaurants up there.
Got it.
And so, yeah, Daniel used to be a student at the university from 2012 to 16. He's managing IQs right now, but when he was a student, he says the vibe there, it was different from how it is now.
We've had parties where people have come in, events people have come in, but it just doesn't feel like the same energy that it was pre-COVID, Yeah, like it was a lot different back then, or maybe I'm the social one, so I don't know if it was people or me, but I'm still the same way I feel. I say hello and hi to everybody that I talk to, I try to at least. But before, for sure, I had a lot of friends in classes and everything. Now when I ask our staff, hey, why don't you ask one of your classmates or something? And they're always telling me, oh, I don't really talk to anybody. I just go in and I leave, so.
And Ahmed also says it's slow right now at IQs. And of course, he attributes that to rising costs and the high cost of living. But another big part of it is because he thinks that the way people have socialized is just changed.
What do Ahmed and others say that might have caused the change?
So Ahmed and University of Manitoba Students' Union President Divya Sharma, they point that change to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the pandemic was actually declared not a global emergency back in May of 2023. But that doesn't mean everything just went back to the way it was before. And so Sharma says the pandemic made young people want to stay in more, and that it didn't help their social development either, and that many her age also dreamed of a university experience like something out of a movie.
There's these entire stereotypes of what a U.S. university might look like, where they are quite tight-knit and that culture is there. And I think that existed at the University of Manitoba prior to COVID, where there'd be people going to basketball games, bigger events. Once again, we obviously have a campus bar here, VW's, and because of that shift in, I guess, those 2-3 years that we lost due to COVID, I think a lot of that culture changed, where students just want to stay home and don't really want to socialize anymore, because I guess sometimes the social skills just didn't develop because of those critical times in our lives where you're supposed to experiment with all these things, and we didn't really get to do that because we had to quarantine, and now we're seeing the consequences of that.
It's interesting because we're talking about the pandemic, but it's not so much that the activities aren't there. You can even, I think they would sound like they were playing pool maybe behind her.
Yeah.
But it's something's shifted in the actual people, like internally what people are feeling.
Yeah, and so to sort of look into that problem, I spoke to Diana Breacher. She's a clinical psychologist and a scholar in residence for positive psychology at Toronto Metropolitan University, and that's also a campus that's like right in the middle of downtown Toronto and kind of has the same problem with what people call a commuter campus, where students are, after their classes, they're going to catch maybe a GO train or the subway to commute. And so she's been working there for 34 years and knows what campus life is like. And so Breacher says the pandemic had a huge impact on anyone who started school online and went back to face-to-face learning after that.
But in terms of engagement on campus, from my perspective, it seems that there's interest, but not necessarily the follow-through. So people will say, oh, yeah, that sounds like a really interesting program. I'm going to sign up. And then they don't show up. So I think that it's like my theory is, based on very little research, that we've all been given permission to opt out, even after we've opted in. It's like there's a social acceptance of it. And so people are doing it.
And Breacher also says people need those interactions outside of the classroom as part of their social development.
You know, I think the myth is that you go to university for your courses, the credentials, the education to develop a career. And yes, those are all essential components to the experience, but there's a whole social developmental component which got missed during the pandemic. What you do between classes, who you bump into at the coffee shop, what extracurricular or social group do you engage in, who do you run into at the gym? All of those kind of happenstance, non-planned experiences that make university life really interesting, the conversations you have with people that aren't planned or structured in a Zoom meeting.
What did students you spoke to have to say about all this?
So I kind of alluded to this before when we were talking about Dr. Diana Breacher, but we heard over and over again from students we spoke to that the U of M has just become a commuter campus where many people show up, go to class, and then they just go home. To them, it seems there's little desire to stick around after classes to socialize. And so for a lot of students we talk to, that can be frustrating because they're craving that social connection outside of class. One of those students is River Inan, who is in her second year at the university.
That's not what I want to do. For example, I want to be socialized, I want to be talk to people. But if other people are not thinking that way and just want to go home, that allows me to meet less people or less opportunities and activities that I can do with people. So it definitely affects it.
And Dion Roque is another student I spoke to. She's in her third year of nursing at the school and says, while classes are a good place to meet people, she says it can still be hard to stick around longer than you have to.
I feel like it's mostly like the culture of the university. I don't, again, with like activities being so late in the day, because we get here, most of the classes are at 8:30 and then like, I don't know, till 3 o'clock and you're like exhausted already. So like, you don't really want to stay that long. And also, I don't know, I feel like more people are just more reserved nowadays and like just to their own thing.
So we've kind of been outlining the challenges so far, right? About getting that connection formed on campus with other students. But what are the students, doing to get around it? Where are they finding success?
Yeah, and that's something we asked a lot of students we talked to about during our interviews. And they say, besides meeting through classes, joining a club or student group would be really beneficial. Even sticking around for some of those extracurricular events like sports can be a good way to meet people too. And that's what River Inan, who we heard from earlier, said helped her find community. And even when we were on the university campus, the Student Wellness Center, they actually had like a speed friending event. So it was like speed dating, but to make friends.
That's super fun. I love that.
Yeah, it sounded like it was a really cool event. We couldn't actually go in because there were some privacy concerns about bringing the big camera in there, which is super understandable. But we spoke to the folks there and it sounded like it went really well. We also spoke to Isham Singh, and he's in his 7th year at the school. And at one point, he was part of more than a dozen groups and clubs on the campus. And I kind of joke like he's an encyclopedia of clubs. You won't see his name listed anywhere officially, but he's got all this knowledge about sort of the scene and the club scene there. And he told us this funny story about how he joined a group named Cake. And while that sounds like it's pretty yummy and delicious, it actually stands for Crochet and Knitting Enthusiasts. And so
did he know?
No, so
or
even though
he was joining a baking club or something?
I guess so, yeah. And so even though he didn't know much about those hobbies, Singh says it's important to put yourself out there in sort of those kind of scenarios and to find a group even to get immersed in. And he also says it's on students as well to go looking for the social experiences that they want.
You might find the nicest communities or the weirdest communities by just searching around, and then you show up to their events and you decide if you like it and you'll find friends there.
And River Inan, who we heard from earlier, might agree with him. She went looking for those university experiences she's been craving.
I think that's the key to make more friends, like to find activities like you're interested in and find where you can find these activities in university and then make your friends, make your way from there.
And then you have friends, and then you can crochet, and then you can play a sport, and then maybe you can make cake too, depending on the club.
Exactly. Yeah, you never know where it'll take you.
Thanks so much for bringing this in.
Thanks so much for having me.
That is Gavin Axelrod, a reporter at CBC Manitoba. We spoke yesterday with his report, and if you want to read more about it, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Let's go to Lauren Donnelly. She's in this morning for Heather at 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, live in our news center with our headlines.
Good morning, Marcy. People in a small northern Manitoba community are missing medical appointments because they can't afford the cost of getting to them. One local is fundraising to help her family and others get the care they need. And Environment Canada has issued a new round of extreme cold warnings for the prairies with good reason. With the wind chill, it feels like minus 50 this morning through most of northern Alberta, Saskatchewan, and right here in Manitoba. Across the southern prairies, around minus 30. And while wind chill values will moderate today, the extreme cold is expected to return tonight. We'll have more local news coming up after World Report.
All right. Thanks, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Yes, if you do have stuff to do out and about today in the daytime, we will get a bit of a break. It's still going to be cold, but winds will be northeast about 20 today, and our high in Winnipeg is going to be 17 degrees. But once again, with wind chills, it'll be a lot colder. On the morning commute, we have been doing pretty well this morning. It's been quiet out there. Call us if you do see any problems. It's 788-3093. That's the commuter line. 788-3093 if you have anything to report or if you want to let us know what your morning's like out there. The roof shot on our YouTube page of downtown Winnipeg just looks completely frosty this morning. But often in these cold conditions, you know, the streets are dried out. So hopefully that's the case and there's no problems out there, but call us if you need to. Coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, Festival de Voyageur starts tonight. We're going to hear about some of the snowy works of art that are on display, so stay tuned for that. And after 8, we continue our series of discussions about healthcare, and specifically about how to get people moving through the system to where they ultimately should be. Personal care homes is where we're looking at today. Where do you want to spend your last days? It is a bleak question, but it is one that aging Manitobans and their families will face. And while personal care homes don't always have a reputation of being homey, a former Winnipegger is pushing to change that. We're going to hear more about small care home models and how they could change how we age. Also, how do they fit into the system? Yesterday on the program, we were kind of talking a bit about this and hearing how they could be an important piece to take some pressure off of emergency rooms and hospitals where people might be staying now as they wait for maybe space in larger facilities. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about the small care home model.
On Cue with Tom Power.
The Grammy-winning singer-songwriter Alessia Cara has made an unlikely career making songs about being an introvert in an industry that rewards extroverts. On the occasion of her new album, Alessia will be in the studio talking a little bit about her early days and what she's learned to make this album. That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
5 former Canadian prime ministers are rallying around the flag, urging Canadians to put their patriotism on display. Joe Clark will be here to talk about how Canada should stand up to Donald Trump's threat to take over this country, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Sam Sampson. World leaders, high-ranking officials, and security experts are in Munich today. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly is there, as is U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. And as Abby Kukadawson reports, the war in Ukraine is at the forefront of the global security conference.
3 days in Munich will allow European officials to meet and mingle with the U.S. delegation for the first time since Donald Trump returned to the White House.
Europeans will use this opportunity to try to get a sense of the U.S. administration.
Raphael Loss is with the European Council on Foreign Relations in Berlin. He says world leaders and high-ranking officials take to the main stage of the security conference in southern Germany.
But much more will happen in the back rooms, on the hallways.
Much of the talk will focus on a pressing issue for Europeans, what happens next in Ukraine. In recent days, Trump has confirmed speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin, announcing the two had agreed to start negotiations immediately. Trump has also suggested Ukraine won't get all of its territory back from the Kremlin. And his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, set off even more alarm bells by saying NATO membership for Kyiv is off the table.
That they've basically conceded on many of the core demands that Vladimir Putin laid out when he started.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeated the need for a lasting and reliable peace, one where security guarantees backed by the U.S. ensure his country is not attacked again. And EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas reiterated concerns emerging from various capitals across the continent.
It is clear that any deal behind our backs will not work. Clear that appeasement also always fails.
There's confusion too about whether U.S. troops would join peacekeeping soldiers from the EU if and when a ceasefire is negotiated. Europe wants to know exactly how much Trump is willing to do on the world stage to uphold the existing rules-based order as he pushes for a more isolationist America. Abby Kualdass in CBC News, Berlin.
NATO countries along the Baltic Sea have stepped up their monitoring of the busy shipping corridor. An investigation is underway after a series of incidents where underwater power and internet cables were severed. Because of that, Estonia has deployed 3 warships to patrol an area in the Gulf of Finland. The CBC's Briar Stewart was invited aboard and explains what they're looking for.
This is 05 negative.
The crew on board the Estonian Navy vessel Sakala peer through binoculars and consult radar to survey the ships around them.
Our operational area covers this part of the Finnish Gulf.
Captain Milos Kant says after an undersea power cable between Estonia and Finland was severed on December 25th, the country sent 3 of its ships out on extra patrols. To Estonia's east is Russia. And since it was sanctioned by Western countries for its invasion of Ukraine, Estonia's Navy says it's seeing a change of ship traffic on the water. More older tankers with often inexperienced crews, part of Russia's shadow fleet. Kant says his crew uses cameras to zoom in on vessels and look for anything suspicious.
Like not adhering to the sea lines of communications, also changing the speed, not having their anchors where they should be.
After the power cable was cut, a tanker that was carrying Russian oil was seized. Its anchor was later found, and officials believed it had been dragged 100 kilometers along the seabed, something that the deputy commander of Estonia's Navy, Captain Johan Aliaseljama, has a hard time believing was accidental.
I don't believe that you cannot notice the anchor dragging for such a long distances.
Russia has called claims that it's sabotaging the undersea infrastructure ridiculous, but NATO has dispatched frigates, patrol aircraft, and naval drones to the Baltic Sea. Briar Stewart, CBC News, near the Gulf of Finland.
To Surrey, BC now. People are mourning the 15-year-old student who was shot and killed by RCMP officers over the weekend. The community held a memorial overnight. As Janelle Hamilton reports, investigators are still trying to piece together the events that led up to the shooting.
I just want to thank everybody for the support.
Flowers, candles, teddy bears, and notes that say, "We love you, we miss you," make up the growing memorial for 15-year-old Chase de Ballenhard. Dozens of family and friends gathered at the site of the shooting in a residential neighborhood in Surrey. His friend Joey Plant says they loved watching horror movies together and joking around.
He's a really funny person. He always brought joy.
Police say the confrontation started a couple blocks away at a nearby secondary school when officers responded to a call about an armed person in a schoolyard.
He made a fatal mistake and shouldn't have cost him his life.
Chase's parents say the teen was neurodivergent and had autism. His mom, Crystal de Ballenhard, says her son had a BB gun that was unloaded and more should have been done to de-escalate the situation.
They yelled, they shouted, and they were doing their job because he did have a weapon, but it's not right. We need to learn from this.
The Independent Investigations Office of BC says it's going to investigate the shooting in as timely a manner as possible and find out whether police actions were necessary, reasonable, and proportionate in the circumstances. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Surrey.
Conservative MPs are meeting for a strategy session today on Parliament Hill. Tomorrow, they're planning to hold a major rally to mark Flag Day. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, Canada's political landscape has changed pretty quickly in the last few weeks. How are the Conservatives responding?
Sam, as the Conservative caucus gathers this Valentine's Day, it's true patriot love they're preparing to wear on their sleeves, with Pierre Poilievre headlining what's hoped to be a major partisan rally tomorrow here in Ottawa, hooked off a holiday that was actually a creation of the Chrétien government in the aftermath of Canada's near-death experience in the 1995 Quebec referendum. National Flag Day will be marked by the Governor-General with a ceremony on Parliament Hill this morning. But earlier this week on his social media, Poilievre stood with the flag at his official residence and called on all Canadians to unite like never before against the threat of tariffs and other insults hurled their way by U.S. President Donald Trump. The text messages his party's been blasting out to try to build a big crowd for his rally, though, suggests it will be a partisan affair, and one that leans into a very different message than the Canada is broken theme that Conservatives had been hammering when their target was Justin Trudeau. Instead, we are now seeing Poilievre use a Wilfrid Laurier quote, actually, Canada first, Canada last, Canada always, as his tagline. Words that simultaneously push back against Trump while also embracing the populist rhetorical style of the America First movement that continues to resonate with some Conservatives here in Canada.
So why is this important heading into the next election?
Well, the latest threats from Washington have put patriotism on the ballot. It was the reason, for example, that Doug Ford cited for pulling the plug early in Ontario and hitting the campaign trail. Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney are both focusing their Liberal leadership campaigns around their qualifications to take on Trump. And recent public opinion surveys suggest the next federal election race is tightening too, as voters shift their focus to the more existential question of Canada's sovereignty.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
The 2-month holiday on federal and provincial sales tax ends tomorrow. But while some businesses say they didn't love the tax break, others want it extended and expanded in the face of potential tariffs from Washington. More now from Philip Lee-Shannock.
So I had to go in, manually just turn off all the taxes.
Toronto gift shop owner Trin Nago put in extra hours prepping for the tax break just before Christmas.
And during that time, you're already working like 12 hours a day, so you're exhausted.
Nago says it didn't help her sales due to the short time frame and limited number of products exempt from the tax. So is she looking forward to reversing her work this weekend?
No, but at least it's a quiet time, so that's fine.
Statistics Canada data on the impact of the tax holiday won't be out for a while, but Dan Kelly of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says it wasn't worth the bother.
So it didn't move the dial very much with respect to sales, but did add a lot in terms of administrative complexity.
Kelly says only 5% of his 100,000 members reported increased sales. But Kelly Higginson of Restaurants Canada disagrees.
So really the GST holiday is doing what it was supposed to do.
She credits the tax holiday for pushing hiring to pre-pandemic highs. And she says with the threat of U.S. tariffs, it should be permanent.
Taxing food, especially at a time like this, really is just wrong.
But economists say such tax holidays tend to push deficits higher at a time when governments may need to spend more to blunt the impacts of a potential trade war on the economy. Philip Lee-Shannock, CBC News, Toronto.
And that's the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Sam Sampson. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. Well, tell you what, the weather is absolutely perfect. And just before you start questioning that statement, I'm talking about perfect for Festival. And it kicks off tonight in our community, Big Festival de Voyageur in St. Boniface. And we're going to hear more about it and about the sculptures, the food, the music. Our community reporter has a report this half hour about Festival. Also this half hour on CBC's Morning Show, we continue our series of conversations about the healthcare system and how to have people move swiftly out of the hospital setting more quickly to free up room in ERs and in wards. But to do that, you have to have personal care home beds. That's also a challenge here. So we're building on a conversation we had yesterday. Today, we're going to talk about whether or not small care home models might be in our future across this country and how they could help in Manitoba. So stay tuned for that. I am Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC's Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Thank you for joining us wherever you're listening or watching. Let's go to our news center live now. Lauren Donnelly is there with headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. A longtime chiropractor in Winnipeg has been suspended from practice. Robert Stitt has been charged with 8 counts of voyeurism after hidden cameras were found in his practice. And Premier Kinew says Canada-U.S. relations are in a better place. That's after a trip down to Washington, but one local politics expert says he's not so sure. Kinew and other premiers met with U.S. government officials in an effort to strengthen the relationship. While they were there, President Donald Trump reiterated his desire to absorb Canada into the U.S. Your next local news is at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Lauren.
You're welcome, Marcy.
Well, yeah, it's Valentine's Day. We asked you online, besides friends and family, what do you love and why? Brenda Beck saying seafood and champagne and chocolate. Esther Mark loves Canada. Anytime I get to spend with my kids as well. Time is precious. A lot of people writing about Canada. I think that's on folks' mind right now. Of course, there's a surge in patriotism right now. But we have Jamie Fadoon saying, I love the CFL, the Canadian Football League. I met a lot of friends. They're like family to me in the past 33 years watching football. And of course, Grey Cups in Winnipeg this year. And finally, we have folks writing in about the snow. Karen Moffat saying, lovely, sparkling white snow. That's going to be mighty crunchy underfoot today, Abby.
Yeah, extreme cold warning still in effect across the province, both in the south and the north, due to this ongoing cold snap. Westman, Parkland, the Interlake regions, wind chills in the values of minus 40 and even getting up to like minus 46 expected into the weekend, with just a brief warming up during the day before temperatures will be dropping again at night. In the northern part of the province, we're seeing Churchill facing wind chills near minus 50, and Thompson is between minus 45 and minus 50 this morning. Conditions in Winnipeg, minus 24 at this time. We're looking for a high of minus 17. However, the wind chill outside feels like minus 32.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Cold.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the morning commute with Corey. It's been quiet, at least up to now.
Yeah, I did get one call. There was a collision on the Nairn Bridge. This was maybe just over half an hour or so ago, so may still be an issue that was blocking westbound Nairn on the bridge there. That may be cleared now, but just heads up. Other than that, though, it's been a very quiet commute overall. Highways are looking okay up north around Thompson, Lynn Lake, Gillam. Some poor visibility there, perhaps on Manitoba 511. But if you have any other updates for me, give me a call. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, is it time for a long-term care to get a makeover in Manitoba? Some doctors and seniors advocates think so. Yesterday, we spoke to Sue Wojcik. She's from the Long-Term and Continuing Care Association of Manitoba to gain a better perspective about the challenges accessing long-term care in our province. Here's a bit of what she said.
We know that best practice and evidence-based is telling us small house models is how we should be caring for older adults in long-term care. We should be looking at person-directed living, all those pieces. But our current PCH stock, some of them have 50-bed units. We're talking about the necessity of 10-bed units. So where is that money coming from to modernize our existing infrastructure? Because we are on a precipice of a crisis. And you said, part of us is we're really frustrated because we've known the tsunami is coming.
So that was Sue Wojcik from the Long-Term and Continuing Care Association of Manitoba. And you just heard her there mentioning, the small care home model. So we want to dig into a little bit more about what that means and whether or not it could be part of the solution to helping and also to building maybe more quickly something rather than a big facility. Former Winnipegger Dr. Samir Sinha is a geriatrician and director of health policy research at the National Institute on Aging. A few weeks ago, the Institute actually published a report that took a closer look at the small care home model. Good morning to you. Good morning, Dr. Sinha. We can't hear you. I'm not sure. I know you're joining us via Zoom, so maybe it's that pesky mute button. Perhaps. We'll give you just a second to sort it out, and we can offer any help we can at this end, just in case. We can see Dr. Sinha. If you're on YouTube, then you can see Dr. There you are. No, we don't have you still. So we're just going to take a moment and sort out our technical issues, and we apologize to you because I know your time is precious. And we're going to go to another item about Festival de Voyageur now, and we'll sort out our issues, and I'm hearing, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what we're...
Please don't be sorry at all. Yeah, we're glad to have you with us. So as you heard, we're talking about small care home models. How do you describe it? What is a small care home?
Yeah, so small care homes can be just as you were hearing. It could be literally a small a home that could be really just 8 to 10 beds. It could be in a neighborhood on its own. It could be in a small community on its own, or it could be, a neighborhood of small care homes that really are a different way of providing personal care. As Sue was also saying, it could be in a larger building where you actually, instead of having 50 people live on one unit, you actually have them living in small household units where everybody, like in a home, has their own room, has their own bathroom, for example, but they're living in more of a home-like setting, which is when we developed our new national long-term care standards. That's what people who might need personal care said they want. They want to be in home-like settings. They want to have resident-centered care, and we need care models that small care homes can deliver that actually even allow better staff experiences.
What would staffing look like if you had a house with 10 residents, or I guess where this exists? What does it look like?
Yeah, so one of the secret sauces of the small care home model is not just actually having a small home-like setting, but it's also a completely different way of staffing. Because really what we've done in large kind of big institutional places is we've often tried to almost industrialize all the care on the basis of tasks. So you might have one person who comes in to drop off and deliver the food. You might have someone who comes and does the cleaning, someone who comes and does the laundry, and then care workers who have elements of their work divided between different folks. In a small care home, it's like, care that you'd have in your own home. Sometimes you have a family member or friend who basically is helping to deliver all of your care. Not only are they doing the bathing and the dressing and getting you ready for the day, but they're also organizing the activities. They're cooking the meals. They're doing the laundry. And you can do it with the same level of staffing Manitoba is promising in its current care homes, but it's actually, instead of having many people do little bits and pieces of care, you actually group it so that in a care home unit of maybe 10 residents, you have 2 to 3 full-time staff on during the day who can actually deliver that level of care. And it often allows them to spend more direct time with residents, deliver better care to those residents, but also to actually have a better staff experience for these people delivering this care too.
Would the person then, would the staff person, so to speak, I guess the nurse, doctor, or whomever you have is the caregiver, would they live with the residents?
No, not necessarily. I mean, not at all. It's just the idea that you come onto the shift, for example, during the day, and then what you would do is you would be assigned to the 3 or 4 residents, and you're just basically like, if you're a loved one caring for someone in your own home, you're just doing all the day-to-day chores in that way. So you're not separating them out. And it's a much more natural style. It's a way that you can actually really get to know the people you're caring. They can actually, feel more comfortable with the caregiver. But no, it's not a requirement that people live in the home.
Yeah, you just shift it 24 hours. Yeah. Why hasn't this model, in your view, been widely adopted in Canada? Like, what are the challenges to it, either fiscally or otherwise?
Yeah, the biggest challenge has been how we've approached care in North America. I think, frankly, Marcy, we don't really value older people. We don't value the care of older people. So we really underfund the provision of long-term care services. One of the reasons why we have people waiting to go into care homes is we grossly underfund home and community care across the country. And then when we look at our care homes, we don't even fund those appropriately. So we give a little bit of money that basically allows developers to say, well, if you want me to build something, I've got to build, a large, kind of facility that packs people, sometimes 2, 3, 4 to a room, and on a large ward, as opposed to maybe, designing more household models, which upfront could be a little bit more expensive in construction costs in some cases, but actually has much better outcomes for both staff and residents and the healthcare system as a whole.
Can you talk more about that, better outcomes for staff and residents, and what that means? I understand one of the aspects here is also keeping people safer from infection in that environment.
Yeah, so absolutely. When you actually have, as Sue was saying, 50 people living on one unit, and tons of staff kind of coming in and out. That was part of the reason why these large care homes became such an easy target for COVID-19, its spread and its impact. When we actually looked at data during the pandemic, we saw that the small care home model actually saw some of the best outcomes in terms of infection prevention and control. Much fewer cases, many fewer outbreaks, way fewer deaths, for example. That's one aspect of outcomes. But also when you actually have care that's more relational, where the staff really know their residents really well, you see much better outcomes, fewer hospitalizations, fewer ED visits, and lower overall healthcare costs. That's great for our healthcare system. But most importantly, the staff actually, feel that they're caring in a much more natural way. They build strong relationships with their residents. They're actually having meaningful experiences. And so what you actually see in these models is much lower turnover of staff, which is a huge problem in our personal care homes today, because the staff just get burnt out in the current way that they're just caring in piecemeal ways. It's not very satisfying, and I don't blame that a lot of people then just choose to leave. In these models, they've seen that they often retain staff at a much, much higher rate because the staff actually enjoy working in this model much more.
How could the model work for rural and remote communities? I guess, the same as it would work in a city center? Or is there something separate we should think about there?
No, the thing I love about this model is the economics of it are built, ideally for a small rural and remote community. Because right now, the way we actually organize, and what Sue was saying in those previous comments, are that the way the funding is structured, you have to build at scale. So you have to have a big home of, at least in Ontario, it's at least 120 people in a home. Now, many smaller rural and remote communities don't have 120 people who need care and don't have the size of that staff. But if you actually build small care homes, you can now say, yeah, actually in our First Nations community or another rural and remote community, we could build a small household. We could find 3 staff on during the day, 3 staff on during the night who could staff this. Manitoba is actually funding the appropriate amount of staffing, but allowing for smaller care homes to be developed. And this is exactly what Alberta is doing to better promote this sort of care in rural and remote communities. This is something that Manitoba could do. There are some examples in Manitoba of small care home-like models, at least the physical aspects of it. This is actually something that's not a huge stretch, and I think would be part of a win-win solution.
It's interesting. My head is spinning. I'm just thinking about somebody sitting, listening, maybe in a big, huge house in a neighborhood in Winnipeg, thinking maybe they would, sell their house, take the profit, they would pay for their care, but have their home, turned into a small care home and have other people in there. Like when you think about spaces that are already standing, or people that want to stay at home, there's so many interesting ways to think about this. Thank you very much for walking us through what you understand about it based on your study and your expertise, Dr. Sinha. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Marcy.
That's Dr. Samir Sinha, a geriatrician and Director of Health Policy Research at the National Institute on Aging. If you're part of one of these small care homes in Winnipeg, or if you want to weigh in, we'd love to hear from you. 788-3205.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world, staying on top of stories around the globe, and connected close to home. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
8:25 and Festival de Voyageur kicks off tonight with music, food, and of course, lots of snow sculptures.
Giant blocks of snow just might get your attention, especially when you see how they've been transformed into works of art. I'm Shanley Vidal, and I'm here at Whittier Park in Winnipeg. That's where Festival de Voyageur is taking place, but it's not the only place where you can see some of these giant snow sculptures.
Out in Sage Creek, we did a blackbird in the marsh with some cattails. We did the maple leafs at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which is basically the maple leafs as Canada with open arms receiving immigration individuals. Then we did a couple for the schools from the kids' designs. Actually, we did Groku, who's some Star Wars character I never even heard of before, and an eagle with a nest.
That's David McNair. He's been creating snow sculptures for 38 years. This one on Provencher and St. Joseph took 45 hours to make. It's called Le Band, and it's based on a drawing by his sculpting partner, Gary Tessier.
We have a bass player, a trumpeter, a guitarist, and a bongo player, and we've got 2 singers on either end of the block as well, too. Festival is all about celebration, history, and music, and this is sort of a funky way of celebrating that.
The enormous sculpture began as a massive white square on the boulevard. It took a lot of careful work with the right tools to bring out the dimensions of the musicians on each of the 4 sides.
Basically, you do have a couple of good snow shovels, and then garden edging shovels we use to remove some of the larger snow. We also have some homemade tools that are made out of, this is out of a paper cutting blade. You can see how the edge is really quite roughened up over the years because the snow is really quite hard as well. And then you go into just using smaller angular trowels for the corners and everything, and some fine polishing rasps that are basically, that's a nailing plate with a handle on it, and it's really good for polishing your surfaces. Really what you want to create is shadows, and that's what makes the sculpture sing.
My name is Brianne Lovely-Heckert, and I'm the Executive Director of Festival du Voyageur. It's really a community festival, and we really are part of this environment, this ecosystem in Winnipeg, and so getting to be able to share the joie de vivre through the snow sculptures all throughout the city is part of the job, and part of making sure that we get that spirit out throughout the community. I know February in Winnipeg isn't always the easiest time for folks, so bringing that joie is important for us.
Those sculptures couldn't be made without a lot of snow, something that was in short supply last year.
I mean, it's a world of difference. The park is covered in snow. It's not going to be muddy again like it was last year, so we're really happy to have that ambience back. I know that the snow is such an important part of our festival and part of that experience of being out here, and it's part of winter in Manitoba, so it feels good to have things start to feel a little bit more normal again for us this year.
But what's it like to create these sculptures in the bitter cold?
Well, you don't stand around a lot, and sometimes you just got to do a little jig, keep your feet warm, but you're really layered up well. The wind is a bit of a killer, so sometimes you'll just go and work on the opposite side of the block out of the wind. If the sun's out and you're on the sunny side of the block, it's really, really nice.
I've been sculpting snow for 40 plus years, many of the years with David here. It makes the winters go by a lot faster, and we have fun doing this because there's no other medium that we can make something so big so quickly.
David McNair and his team will have 8 snow sculptures in total that are part of this year's Festival du Voyageur. Shanley Vidal, CBC News, Winnipeg.
That's our community reporter in unit, Shanley, out reporting with great video, by the way. If you watch this show then you on YouTube, then you saw those sculptures streaming. You can see them in person this weekend, though, of course. David McNair and Gary Tessier's final snow sculpture for this year's event is a row of hearts. It's in honor of opening night. Tonight, Valentine's Day, February 14th, Festival opens. By the way, if you go out tonight, you might receive a special Valentine from Festival de Voyageur's mascot. Léo Latuc will be there handing out red roses tonight. Tonight is also Pride Night at Festival. Normally it takes place in the small tent. This year, though, it's been moved to the big tent, and you can check out all of the festivities and lineup of artists, food, music, events for Festival at Heho.ca. You can check it out. Want to thank the people who work so hard on our programs, and we'll do the full list of folks because it's Friday time, so we want to credit everybody who worked in our unit this week on all the shows locally. Our associate producers, Corey Funk, Abby Adiyemi, Kalkadan Mulugeta, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, May McKillop, Carmen Ponto, Rosanna Hempel, Marshall Hodgins, Dylan Longhurst, Issa Kickson, Chloe Friesen, and Bruce Layden. Our reporters in unit, Shanley Vidal and Jim Agapito. Hosts in unit, Nadia Kidwai, Faith Fundel, and filling in this week, Margot Watt. Producers, Wendy Parker, and filling in this week, Donna Carrero and Robin Summerfield. Travis Peterson and Kevin Nipatebo work on YouTube, our YouTube stream of the show. As well, thanks to Nellie Gonzalez, who's the overall show producer in our current affairs unit, and Leif Larson, who's the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning, I'm Lauren Donnelly in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's minus 25 degrees, mostly cloudy at the Winnipeg airport. A mix of sun and cloud today, a high of minus 17. A Manitoba chiropractor has been charged with 8 counts of voyeurism after hidden cameras were found in his office. Dr. Robert Stitt is no longer practicing and his license is suspended. In January 2024, a patient complained to the Manitoba Chiropractors Association, alleging Stitt inappropriately touched her back. While investigating the complaint, the regulatory body learned that Stitt had been recording his interactions with patients and called Winnipeg police. Police searched Stitt's office and seized 5 fake sprinkler heads that concealed cameras, plus a recording device in a suspended ceiling. His next court date is set for April 1st. Residents in a small northern Manitoba community are missing medical appointments because they can't afford the cost of getting to them. The 200-kilometer trip to Thompson can cost upwards of $350. Rose Moose is fundraising to help her family and others in the community.
I'm fundraising for us to try and get a medical vehicle, for us to have money for anybody to go to have money for food or $150 to get back. But we haven't got that money yet.
The Northern Regional Health Authority said in a statement patients are reimbursed, but only after the travel is complete, and the Health Authority is not responsible for providing transportation services. Leaf Rapids is home to about 350 people with no public transport. A Manitoba man found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his neighbor will appeal the verdict. That's according to his lawyer, Martin Glazer. A jury found Eric Wildman guilty yesterday in the June 2021 death of 40-year-old Clifford Joseph. Joseph's remains were found more than a month after he had been reported missing. He had a broken leg and jaw, though prosecutors say he was killed by gunshots. Glazer says he plans to start the appeal process once his client is officially sentenced.
This is an injustice, and my client maintains his innocence and maintains that he was wrongfully convicted.
During the trial, prosecutors alleged Wildman hit Joseph with his vehicle when he caught him trying to steal from his property in the village of Stead. Wildman then allegedly took Joseph to a different location where he executed him. A Manitoba politics professor questions the value of Premier Wab Kinew's trip to Washington. Kinew and other premiers met with government officials in an effort to boost Canada-U.S. relations. Paul Thomas at the University of Manitoba says that approach may have worked well for Kinew's predecessor, Gary Dewar, but times have changed.
That kind of strategic and tactical approach has far diminished value in dealing with a figure like Donald Trump. He just is not subject to rational arguments.
After the meetings, Kinew told reporters he thought the relationship between the two countries was in a better place. While the premiers were in Washington, President Trump repeated his desire to make Canada the 51st state. And considering those threats coming from the Trump White House, former Prime Minister Joe Clark, like many Canadians, is concerned about the country's sovereignty. He's urging Canadians to let their voices be heard south of the border.
Including simple little things like excuse me for this simplicity, simply writing letters to our friends in the U.S., being in touch with them, not to condemn their president, but to make the case of the value which most of them know quite precisely that Canada holds.
That's Clark in conversation with Matt Galloway, the host of The Current on CBC Radio 1. You can hear that full interview coming up later this morning. Clark and the other 4 surviving former prime ministers are calling on Canadians to show their patriotism tomorrow by flying the Maple Leaf for Flag Day. Finally, with the final day of the GST holiday taken into account, the Bank of Montreal has released an estimate on what Canadians can expect to spend if they go out tonight for Valentine's Day. On average, the bank says dinner, drinks, flowers, and parking will come to $173. That is your CBC News from Winnipeg.
All right, thanks, Lauren, for the morning.
Thank you, Marcy.
All right, we have a great call-in today on Radio Noon, and Corey is here to tell us what it means, because it's about your meet cute story.
And it's not about like a weird deli experience. It is about...
or steaks.
In a rom-com, there's always that moment where the two people meet, and it's very cute, and you're like, how are they going to get together? A lot of people have their meet cute story. It's called a meet cute in the rom-com parlance. And we want to hear your meet cute stories on Radio Noon today. How did you meet your partner? How did you meet? Is it unexpected? Is it a funny story there? We want to hear it.
So cute. I have a good one, but let's do weather traffic. I don't know if we'll have time for it. So you have to say what about traffic?
Very quiet commute overall. Nothing really to report.
All right. Abby.
Yeah, we have that extreme cold warning in effect across the province. We're looking at the Westman, Parkland, Interlake, and all the way down to the northern, up north we're seeing wind chills from like minus 40 to minus 50. But for Winnipeg, we're going to be in the range of minus 35, minus 37 today. And that continues into the weekend.
I should elaborate here, you two, because meet cute could be your spouse, your partner, but it also could be your friend. So I have my meet cute story I'm going to share actually isn't going to be about my spouse, even though it's cute too. It's about my best friend. I met my best friend, still to this day, and I'm 50 years old, and so is she. I met her waiting to meet our kindergarten teacher. Like, we were walking to meet the teacher for our first day of kindergarten, and our mom met each other and said, "Oh, you live up the road? Great. Why don't the girls walk to school together?" So they had met kind of there, and then we started walking to school together, and she was my best friend for my whole life. She moved to Poland for 2 years. My mom gave me this speech. Well, you know, honey, friendships change. Nope. We pen-palled all through the 80s. We stayed friends. She would come back at Christmas and surprise me. My mom would be like, wouldn't tell me, and then she'd surprise me. We'd have these little kid get-togethers, and still to this day.
Cute.
I know. Shouting out Kara some friend love today. So what's your meet cute story? I suspect we're going to hear some lovely ones on Radio Noon between 12:30 and 1, so don't miss the call in today. Happy Valentine's Day. Take care, be well, stay warm, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone.